Chapter 946. Tai Wu's body stiffened. He was a celestial venerable, but he felt a chill run down his spine from head to toe. What level of an evolver was he? Even if he only used the energy of the Illuminator level, it was still terrifying. Moreover, his divine instincts were still there, but he didn't sense anything beforehand. Now he suddenly heard someone sigh beside his ear. Even Tai Wu felt a chill and apprehension. Chu Feng had a sorrowful expression. He had also heard that sigh. Even at the darkest moment of his life, he knew that this matter was extraordinary. He had always known that his heart wasn't cold enough and couldn't be hard and cruel to the end. He was willing to be humble as long as his family and friends died one by one, as long as they were resurrected. If he could start over, he hoped that he would be flawless and could follow his heart all the way to the end. At this moment, Tai Wu's body was tense. The stone embryo was sparkling and divine light surged violently. He couldn't calm down and could no longer look down on the universe indifferently. Suddenly, he retreated rapidly, and the energy around his body became denser. Qi and blood filled the air, and all kinds of energy bodies densely covered the surroundings. He was going to fight. Impossible, he whispered, revealing a fearful expression. That was because he had found the source of the sigh. Although it seemed to come from the depths of the universe, Tai Wu finally determined that it actually came from the depths of the abyss. Prior to this, the people of the Yang realm had conducted all kinds of tests and experiments to monitor the radiation value of this place. They clearly understood the root of the danger here. Tai Wu already knew that there was an extremely ancient and terrifying evolver here at the great cosmos level. People at this level were almost at the end of their evolutionary path. Outsiders simply didn't know what they would become after reaching this step, but one thing was certain. They were on the verge of death and were already at the end of their declining period. The great martial heavenly venerable had personally deduced that the existence in the abyss was already dead. It had entered this so-called declining period and couldn't wake up at all. This was a creature that was sleeping and waiting for its final moment of death to arrive. As long as one didn't provoke it or use energy above the god level to activate its instincts, it wasn't a big deal even if the species it evolved into was extremely terrifying. The great martial heavenly venerable suppressed himself and didn't use any god-level methods to stimulate the great cosmos-level creature. He firmly believed that this creature wouldn't wake up, but the truth was right in front of him. The ancient existence in the Yang realm had already awakened and let out a sound. "Are you an ancient person from the Yang realm?" The stone body spoke, stabilizing his mind. Back then, the Yang realm was in great chaos. For some unknown reason, a few powerhouses suddenly started a war and fought in the heavens. Some people were seriously injured and on the verge of death. They brought the treasures of the Yang realm with them to choose their burial ground. The great abyss of the Nether realm was considered to be an extremely terrifying grave. Now, the almighty of the most ancient era, the era where even the Tai Wu was not born, had woken up and was sighing in the tomb. How could he not feel cold? When you look down on ants like a dragon, have you ever thought that a dragon is also looking down on you? Below the great abyss, a weak and decaying voice sounded. It was extremely soft, full of lethargy, carrying the reminiscence of the past, as well as the great changes of one's life. Yao Yao had already stopped and retreated to the side. Up to this point, the mother gold divine sword in her hand had been shattered and turned into a dozen or so fragments. When some of them flew back, they pierced in her own flesh. The scene was momentarily silent. The Tai Wu Tianzuan's expression was solemn. After a moment, he said, "Without such a creature, who would dare to look at a celestial as an ant? Not even you." A smooth, round mirror appeared beside him. It actually reflected the blurry scenery of the great abyss. It was absorbing the energy radiating from here and carrying out deductions. On the surface of the mirror, various patterns interweaved and many symbols appeared. The Tai Wu Tianzuan was uneasy and took the risk to use a celestial treasure to probe the situation below. In reality, you can't kill anyone. The Taiwu Tianzuan said to himself. His gaze gradually became resplendent, and he gradually became more confident. He was convinced that this ancient existence was weaker than he had imagined. Even if he spoke now, it was just an empty shell. He simply couldn't make a move. Rather than saying that this great cosmos-level evolved being had revived, it would be better to say that a wisp of his will reverberated in this burial ground like a ghost and issued his final voice. Yes, I'm powerless to make a move. Moreover, I've never killed any creature here. The aged voice was very calm and unperturbed. But after hearing the words of the great cosmos-level evolved being, the Taiwu Tianzuan became apprehensive for the first time. In the past, there had been celestial venerables who had entered the netherworld and disappeared forever. Could it be that this person had killed them when he could still make a move? This horrified him. There were dangers in the netherworld that he didn't understand. The reason he dared to come here was because he had detected the aura of decay radiating from the great abyss. He clearly understood the state of the evolved being here, but now it seemed that he had overlooked something incomparably important. The Taiwu Tianzuan turned around and left. His body broke through the cosmos space and was about to escape into the primal chaos. The weak and aged voice rang out. Although it was ordinary, it sounded like a thunderclap in the Taiwu Tianzuan's ears, making his blood run cold. Although I'm not a native of this world, I have a sense of belonging after sleeping here. Don't you, the Azure Dragon, look down on everything? Come in and take a look. The Taiwu Tianzuan immediately regretted his actions. He had wasted too much time here and had actually awakened this evolved being that had been quietly waiting for death. A great accident had occurred. He was traversing, and the endless sea of stars appeared behind him. He firmly believed that there wouldn't be any mishaps once he entered the primal chaos. However, at this moment, he felt a chill from head to toe. He couldn't control his body and actually began to fly backwards. He rapidly returned along the path he came from and fell into the great abyss with a bang. The Taiwu Tianzuan roared. This was the first time he had lost control of himself like this. He was no longer calm and aloof, and he was no longer able to look down on the entire netherworld. He was resisting and releasing his own energy without holding anything back. Powerful fluctuations shot out from his body as ancestral Taoist matter pervaded the air. It could simply destroy the world. The laws and order of the netherworld were in disorder and were being suppressed by him. Unfortunately, he had just revealed the true strength of an Empyrean when he was suppressed by a formless energy. He actually couldn't move and fell straight into the pitch-black depths of the great abyss. Even his heart was trembling. After becoming an Empyrean, who could detain him? Who could control his body like this? The great abyss was boundless. He continuously fell and let out a long roar, but he couldn't control his body at all. It was like an iron filament being sucked in by a giant magnet. He couldn't struggle free. In the blink of an eye, he understood that the more celestial venerable level energy he released, the faster he fell. He was heading towards that terrifying end and was progressing at an even faster pace. However, when he restrained his own aura and suppressed it to the Illuminator realm and even the Saint realm, he discovered that it was useless. The trend had already been set and couldn't be changed. The Taiwu Tianzuan felt that he was wrong. The so-called dying person in the great abyss and the so-called decaying to the point where only obsession was left was probably just his wishful thinking. Otherwise, how could he be pulled down like this? He felt a headache coming on because he was about to face an evolved body of the great cosmos. When the path of the predecessors wasn't enough, no one knew what would happen when a life form of this level advanced towards the ultimate evolved body. As such, even the Taiwu Tianzuan didn't know what this terrifying evolution from a long time ago had become. Was it a human, a beast, a variant, or something else? Boom! He no longer restrained himself and erupted with the strongest energy in the depths of the great abyss. He wanted to resist to the end and fight with his life on the line. His body was becoming bigger, causing the star remains along the way to explode and turn into fine powder. Compared to him, Those so-called broken planets were too small. The celestial, venerable body obliterated everything, and nothing in the world could stop it. He burned fiercely, and the ancestral Tao matter surged as he released it to his heart's content. Soon after, he saw the bottom of the great abyss. Then, his scalp went numb as he saw a part of the truth. In the darkness, there were corpses sitting one after another. They were all incomparably large, and the stars in front of them weren't even comparable to dust. What was this? Heavenly deities. There wasn't just one heavenly deity corpse, but many of them. They were already ice cold. Even if their bodies were unbreakable throughout the ages, there was still a decaying aura pervading the air. They were all too large and surrounded by stars. These heavenly deities had all died here. The Taiwu Tianzuan felt a chill run down his back. Even though he was a stone embryo, he still felt goosebumps all over his body, and his scalp was tense. Even though his body was brilliant and emitting dazzling radiance, ancestral Tao matter seeping out and illuminating all directions, he still couldn't illuminate the entire great abyss. The bottom was still dusky, and he could only vaguely see everything. Meanwhile, at the very end of the great abyss, there was a creature that was decaying, and cold. It still carried the slightest bit of vitality. That should be an evolved body of the great cosmos level. When the Taiwu Tianzuan saw this, his body immediately trembled violently, his scalp about to explode. As an Empyrean, he actually had this type of experience, this type of horror. This is a great cosmos-level creature. There is no path ahead, so it ultimately transformed into this. He wanted to retreat, but he couldn't succeed. The Taiwu Tianzuan lost his composure. He couldn't maintain his calm at all. He struggled with everything he had. That place was extremely dark, and normal people couldn't see anything. Only the Taiwu Tianzuan could see the truth. "What exactly are you?" he shouted in a low voice. "I am merely a failure on the path of evolution, nothing more." A weak and decaying voice sounded from that place. "Didn't you say that you wouldn't take action and that you didn't have the ability to take action?" Taiwu's back went cold. He felt as if his life was in danger. Something bad was about to happen. "Yes." "Then you." Taiwu's voice was trembling. The instant he felt death descend, he became completely uneasy. His heart was pounding and his entire body went taut. Then, he moved forward and quickly attacked. He released the most terrifying attack. Endless ancestral Tao matter, all types of energy bodies, as well as forbidden techniques and other things were all released. However, everything was futile. He felt as if his body was withering up, becoming weak, heading towards decline. Then he saw that there was a pitch-black cave behind the evolved body. It was sending the Empyrean towards the end of his life. The other Empyreans had also died because of this. "What is that?" Taiwu was trembling. The life aura within his body was sharply decreasing. He knew that he was about to die without any hope. "You should have guessed it," the evolved body said. "Could it be?" Taiwu couldn't control himself. His body was rumbling and swaying, and his soul was splitting into pieces. He was about to die in a sitting posture. Suddenly, the pitch-black cave became extremely dazzling. A rain of light sprinkled down, golden and incomparably divine. The blazing heat was difficult to resist. Chapter 9:47. To think that I, Taiwu, could move unhindered through the heavens and killed countless. I looked down on a glorious great era and swept through all opponents in the same world. Only then did I rise to power. After endless years of torment, I established a Tao Earth, created an extreme breathing technique, and became the ancestor of a sect. In the end, I have to experience this kind of death tribulation. I have to silently wait for death. How sad and laughable. The stone body spoke. He was unwilling but helpless. His eyes dimmed and his gaze became lax. His soul light was disintegrating and splitting into pieces. The ancestral Tao substance continuously drifted away. He sat there cross-legged, unable to move at all. The vitality around his body was rapidly flowing away. His Tao body was rapidly deteriorating, and a decaying aura lingered around his body. A heavenly deity of a generation was falling. There was no turning point. No matter how great his divine abilities were, he could only walk step by step towards the end of his life here. He was helpless and unwilling. He let the soul light within his body struggle and burn indiscriminately, but it was all futile. He couldn't change anything at all. In front of him, there were enormous heavenly deity true bodies that were even more majestic than him. According to seniority, they were all far older than him. Their identities and origins were so great that it was frightening. However, they had long since passed away in a sitting posture. They couldn't break free from this hopeless situation. These heavenly deities were arranged and sat cross-legged. This was a choice to die with dignity and also helplessly bury themselves. There was no hope to speak of after falling here. In the final moments of his life, Tai Wu stared at the pitch-black cave in front of him. From time to time, it would shine, and from time to time, it would become deep and dark. At the same time, he was also looking at the terrifying creature that made him feel incomparably fearful, the evolved great cosmos body. If news of its appearance were to spread, the world would be greatly shaken. This made people deeply feel the terror of the end of evolution. Tai Wu fell here. After looking for a long time, he still felt horrified. He saw one of the world's greatest secrets, but he couldn't bring this information back to the world of the living. He couldn't even transmit it outside the great abyss. The entire world was boundless. All the powerhouses were exploring and searching, but they didn't know that there was a part of the truth and answers here. There was no path ahead of evolution. There was a cave here, and there was an evolved great cosmos body here. There were some answers here, as well as the disastrous remnants and truth. When you look down on ants like an azure dragon, did you ever think that there was also an azure dragon looking down on you? At the last moment, he heard these words again. His eyes were lifeless as he silently awaited death. At this moment, at the edge of the cosmos, the group of people who followed Tai Wu overall felt their bodies turning cold. It was as though they had fallen into hell. Tai Wu was a supreme, heavenly sovereign in their eyes, but he was swallowed by the abyss just like that. The two Tao children cried loudly, and the others were also shivering. Even the celestial venerables had encountered a death tribulation. This netherworld universe far exceeded their imagination. It was no wonder that the other Empyreans weren't willing to rashly step foot here. Only the extreme martial Empyrean was incomparably anxious because of some problems. He longed for those two supreme treasures that had been lost in this part of the universe. So he hurried over and risked his life. But in the end, an accident really did happen. However, this was not the end. This group of people suddenly discovered that an invisible force had imprisoned them. It pierced through the primal chaos mist, and the influence of time was beyond the scope of the Yin realm. No, someone cried out loudly. There were experts among the evolvers who had followed Tai Wu here. They were true deities, but in the end, they were led away and flew towards the depths of the netherworld. The two Tao children cried out in fright and turned around to leave. In the end, the few deities were swallowed into the abyss and fell down. They struggled like ordinary creatures that were drowning. Among them were the white fox, the three-legged flying dragon, and the human race's deity-level powerhouses, but they all met the same fate. They were unable to break free and fell to the bottom of the abyss. When they saw the extreme martial Empyrean on the verge of death, they wanted to cry out loudly, but in the end, they discovered that they couldn't say anything. They didn't even have the strength to open their mouths. Even the Empyrean was sitting here waiting for death. What else could they change? At the same time that these people's hearts were like dead ashes, they quickly began to die. Blazing radiance circulated in that black hole, and supreme power filled the air. They turned into dust in a breath's time. A gust of wind blew through the mysterious hole, and they vanished like smoke in thin air. These were all powerhouses that were known as gods among the evolvers. In the end, they died just like that without any value. No one in the world knew what happened to them in the end. The netherworld universe was in a clamor, and all the evolvers were in an uproar. The extreme martial Empyrean had been swallowed, and even the few deities that had followed him here had disappeared. The greatest calamity of the netherworld had passed just like that? What about Chu Feng? What about his relatives and friends? A few legendary guests were gazing into the distance at the abyss. At this moment, the evolvers of every race wanted to know the answer. But they couldn't see anything because I couldn't capture the scene. The abyss swallowed the sky. In the process of sucking in the extreme martial Empyrean and the few deities, even the nearby I disappeared. Outside the abyss, the ancestral demon's cauldron shone resplendently. It had already done its best to absorb the bloody mist into the cauldron, even though the odds were against it, and it might not be able to save the people who had passed away, but it really did try its best. In fact, it had suffered serious damage itself. There were many cracks on it, and it had almost been pierced through by a casual finger of the extreme martial Empyrean. The fine marks on the cauldron's walls were like spiderwebs. I can't hold on any longer. It was trembling. Now, it wasn't the era when it followed the ancestral demon, and it was no longer a divine cauldron, but it was still going to be swallowed by the abyss and sent flying. Shrink, shouted Chu Feng with grief. He didn't know how his parents, the black yak, the yellow cattle, and Zhou Quan were doing. There were no deities in this world, so who could save them? Moreover, so much time had passed. They had been delayed and missed the best opportunity. Could they still be saved? Who could defy the heavens? Was it Yao Yao? She couldn't even protect herself. Only after the great battle stopped did she realize how serious her injuries were. She had almost died and her Tao had vanished. Buzz, the ancestral demon's cauldron shrunk to the size of a fist and turned into a ball of gentle light. It rushed toward Chu Feng and was collected into the stone box. Yao Yao, come quickly, shouted Chu Feng. He was worried that an accident would happen to her. There was a lot of grief, but he couldn't allow himself to be greatly grieved. Even though they didn't have divine-level energy fluctuations, they were still somewhat affected now. They were about to be swallowed by the great abyss destructive power. At this moment, even Chu Feng himself was struggling. His soul light condensed with blood and entered the stone box. Unfortunately, it didn't have a lid, so he had thrown it into the darkness in a fit of anger. At this moment, there were many tears on Yao Yao's battle skirt. They were all torn by the Tai Wu's secret technique. One could imagine what kind of terrifying attack she had endured. Blood was dripping from the space between her brows. The finger mark from before was spreading. It wasn't that she wasn't hurt, but she had suppressed it. Now it was reflected. The space between her brows had been pierced, and there was a terrifying energy eroding it. In addition, there were a few stone fragments in her hair with blood. That was the Tai Wu deity's trump card. It was an innate object peeled off from the stone embryo. The stone had originally gathered into needles, but Yao Yao had blocked it with the sword embryo. Now the divine sword was broken and the stone weapon had turned into fine powder, but it still injured her. In addition, there were many wounds on Yao Yao's body. Her own sword had been broken into more than 10 pieces, and some of the fragments flew back and pierced into her body, causing blood to gush out. Yao Yao. Chu Feng's soul light wrapped around the stone box and rushed over to receive Yao Yao. Yao Yao's eyes were slack now. There was a big problem. Although he knew that Yao Yao's corporeal body had survived in the abyss for many years, the current situation wasn't right. There might be a celestial venerable perishing below, and he was afraid that Yao Yao would be affected. In the end, the stone box and Yao Yao fell together and sank into the darkness. Chu Feng felt a destructive aura. He was about to perish and quickly pulled Yao Yao into the stone box. It was very crowded now, and the small world inside was only a square meter. Then he fainted in the process of falling and became unconscious. There was an indescribable fluctuation at the bottom of the abyss that was suppressing his soul light. After a long time, Chu Feng woke up. His soul light was still there, condensing his own blood. He was in the stone box and rising continuously in the darkness. He saw Yao Yao flying out of the abyss with the stone box in her hand. Her eyes were still dim. He called out to her repeatedly, but she didn't respond at all. She was sending him out instinctively. The lid of the box was also there. It had been found. When Chu Feng and the stone box left the abyss together, Yao Yao pushed him out as though she had exhausted the last of her strength. Then she fell straight down with her back facing the sky. Her eyes were incomparably empty and were no longer as empty as before. Yao Yao, shouted Chu Feng. He had lost too many people today. He really couldn't accept losing Yao Yao as well and was about to throw himself down. Leave this place. Once we go down, we'll all die without a doubt. Moreover, we can't change anything at all unless you can fully activate this stone box and truly control it. The demon ancestral cauldron transmitted its voice to warn Chu Feng. Yao Yao. Chu Feng was too reluctant to part with her. He looked at Yao Yao, whose hair was in a mess and was falling straight down. He didn't know how she was in the end. At the last moment, her eyes were so empty and without a bit of luster. Chu Feng was extremely afraid. But the demon ancestral cauldron was right. He still couldn't jump down and throw his life away. There was still blood mist and relatives inside the demon ancestral cauldron. He had to bring them away and bring them back to life. But could anyone really come back to life? Chu Feng didn't know. This day was the darkest day of his life. His heart was in so much grief that it was numb. He had lost too many people. Yao Yao, he called out in pain. Could he not hold back even the last person? I believe that nothing will happen to her. She's the number one under the ancient starry skies. In the present world, she can fight a celestial venerable and slay Taiwu. Such a heaven-bestowed woman won't die like this. Moreover, she was originally revived in the abyss. Perhaps staying behind is her intention. There will be a day when she reappears. The Yang realm will turn upside down because of her. The demon ancestral cauldron transmitted its voice to encourage Chu Feng. It was giving him hope, making him high-spirited, and encouraging him to be full of fighting spirit. Chu Feng suddenly raised his head and roared at the sky. His voice was like thunder and shook the starry skies. I won't sink into depravity. I want to kill my way into the Yang realm. Taiwu's true body isn't dead yet. He's in the Yang realm, enjoying the worship of countless creatures in the world. I want to kill my way over. He was like a wounded lone wolf who had lost everything. He had no companions, no parents. He let out a long howl between the heaven and earth. Within the desolation, there was unwillingness and unyielding. Chu Feng's soul light surged and his blood was condensing. He wanted to reconstruct his true body. He wouldn't fall into despair after this setback. He wanted to kill his way into the Yang realm. He wanted to rise and slay the Taiwu's true body. In addition, there were still the three great celestial venerables Hyunyi, Primordial, and Wanyu. They were all his enemies. The Yang realm was in chaos because of them, and they had killed too many people. Red Spider Lily, Thunder God, Skyblade, do you guys have spirits? I'll fight with you again in the Yang realm. Chu Feng roared loudly. He wanted to penetrate the starry skies and call upon the true spirits and remnant souls that could go through life and death with him. He wanted to kill his way into the Yang realm. Chapter 948. Chu Feng was very tired. Even though there was a flame burning in his heart and his fighting spirit was aroused, this huge, unforeseen event had exhausted him mentally and physically. How could he not be in pain and grief as his relatives and friends died in front of him one by one? Outside the great abyss was endless darkness. He only calmed down after a long time. His soul light swayed many times, and his blood was also shining, but he couldn't reconstruct his corporeal body. It was too painful, not only his heart, but also his body. This was a death calamity and endless sorrow. He staggered into the distance and walked alone. Find a place to revive Old Black, Yellow Cattle, and the others. Chu Feng said softly. He was very haggard and nervous. He was afraid that those people would never be there after he opened the ancestral demon cauldron's lid. At this moment, the ancestral demon cauldron had also sunk into a deep sleep. Its body was full of scars and had almost been pierced through. This battle, this calamity, no matter if it was man or weapon, they had all experienced the greatest torment. To be able to survive and exist in this world was truly not easy. The cauldron's walls were dyed with blood, but it was dark and without the luster of life. Whose was it? Chu Feng's heart was trembling. He was intensely uneasy after leaving the great abyss for a bit and arriving at a quiet place. Chu Feng was about to open the cauldron's lid. His hands were trembling, and he was actually terrified in his heart. This was completely different from his former decisiveness. It was because he cared too much. Don't move. There's a world within my body that can temporarily preserve my current state. You and I are both on the verge of death and are powerless to reverse the situation. The ancestral demon cauldron was roused and reminded him like this. It was undergoing nirvana and brewing its vitality. Back then, it pierced through the Shilin and deity planet and swallowed endless essence. Its body contained a sea of mountain and river essence energy. Everything stopped deteriorating in the special life field within its body. Chu Feng's hand stopped. He really didn't dare to rashly open the bloody cauldron's lid. Now, he actually felt as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden. It was better to have hope than despair. In this short period of time, he felt rather strenuous. Even his soul light was somewhat dim, and he felt waves of weakness. He had endured too much pressure just now. Go home. When his body and mind were at their most exhausted, for the first time, he felt a sense of loneliness and helplessness. He wanted to go back. He wanted to go back to the place that was once filled with laughter. Earth, Kunlun, his own courtyard, and Mount Eternal. These were all the warm places he could recall. He was really very weak and had almost died here. Even though he was lucky enough to survive, he only had a dim soul light and some blood left. His bones and physical body had all been destroyed. Gazing at the faint stars at the end of the darkness, Chu Feng stood there quietly. He circulated his spirit-breathing technique and stabilized his soul injury. His soul flame pulsed and gradually became more vigorous. For the time being, he did not want to make a deal with the Wormhole Express Company to open a wormhole. He was very wary of them. At this stage, he could only trust himself. Brother-in-law, there was someone who came from the cold void, the voice young and tender, carrying a sobbing tone, whimpering, searching frantically in this region outside the great abyss. She was Ing Xiao Xiao. The silver-haired little Lolita brought along an old servant from the quasi-immortal race and hurried over here. She shed tears of anxiousness as she searched this area unceasingly. Brother-in-law, where are you? The first forbidden area of the pitch-black Een realm was cold and silent since time immemorial. It was cut off from the rest of the world, and no living creatures could be seen all year round. It was only recently that there were traces of humans here. Ing Xiao Xiao cried, because she couldn't find him. She didn't discover anything, and only her voice was drifting in the air as she sobbed softly. After a while, there were many figures outside the great abyss. A few more people arrived and made use of a few super wormholes to quickly rush over here and wander back and forth in this region. But the great abyss was extremely vast and boundless. Ordinary people seemed very insignificant when they came here. Even if they sensed it with their divine senses, it wasn't enough. There were people traversing soundlessly on spatial secret treasures at an extremely fast speed as they weaved through the great abyss. They held a treasured mirror in their hands that emitted beams of light to illuminate the area ahead. Among them, there were famous people who had survived from ancient times. There were also people covered in large black cloaks and evolvers who wore special masks that couldn't be sensed. There were many people who came with different objectives. Some people were worried about Chu Feng and really wanted to know whether he had survived or not. There were also people who coveted the Yang realm's secret treasures after the celestial venerable passed away and wanted to obtain them. There were even people who heard the Yang realm's people's discussions and knew that Chu Feng had a supreme treasure on him that moved the great martial celestial venerable to the extent that he didn't hesitate to descend personally. Many people were tempted. What kind of ultimate item was that? It was very quiet outside the great abyss, but the people's hearts weren't. There were many warm-hearted people who brought along their friends. They came for Chu Feng and wanted to find him so that they could participate in the rescue. He told her that this place wasn't peaceful and that she should return to the quasi-saint race quickly. "I want to protect you," she called out to that old servant and asked him to follow her to protect Chu Feng. She hoped that Chu Feng could recover sooner. "My elder sister will come soon, and so will my elder brother. They're all looking for you, even though the saints in our race used to." She didn't continue speaking when she reached this point, as she didn't want to mention those unhappy things again. She was powerless to refute the decisions made by those 3 ancient saints in the past. "Yes, the saints of your race have arrived. Xiao Xiao, you can go back first. Goodbye." Chu Feng left. The demon ancestor's cauldron pierced through the void and brought him away as it hurried toward Earth. Chu Feng heaved a sigh of relief that this cauldron could recover to this extent. If not, he might have to face some dangers. His current state really wasn't good. He would save his parents, Yellow Cattle, and the others. After that, he would go to the Yang realm and disregard everything to cultivate and kill Tai Wu. This was the thought in Chu Feng's heart. He prayed for everything to go smoothly and yearned for a miracle so that all those people in the cauldron could come back to life. He was filled with hope and obsession. Many people came from outside the abyss, and it became more and more lively. Evolvers from various places and the leading figures of each race had arrived to search for Chu Feng's whereabouts. They revered the abyss and came with different objectives. "I hope you can survive." Ziyuan, Yuan Mo, and the others arrived under the accompaniment of their clansmen. They stood here for a long time. Yuan Shicheng, Yuan, and Wudi, and the others had also arrived. There was also the undead silkworm prince whose race had been annihilated. They were all sighing softly, while some people even burned joss paper to hold a memorial service. Not everyone thought that Chu Feng could survive. In the end, the abyss swallowed everything, and even the heaven's eye in the extreme faraway regions disappeared. Some people who came with bad intentions were very low-key. They didn't act differently, but they couldn't find anything for a while. Ing Xiao was very tight-lipped and didn't tell anyone. She didn't tell anyone that Chu Feng was still alive. But the truth couldn't be concealed. Someone found a few strands of Chu Feng's blood in the starry skies. They were still active and had vitality. This was blood essence, so they determined that he might not be dead. For the time being, all the disturbances here had nothing to do with Chu Feng. He returned to Earth and buried himself in the demonic ancestors' cauldron among the famed mountains and great rivers. He laid down a shocking domain to revive himself and repair the cauldron. Now, all living things were reviving and the spiritual chi was dense. Earth had been nourished by the huge amount of mutant earth Chu Feng had collected and was completely activated. The mountains and rivers in every region produced essence like a great waterfall. All living things were intelligent, and even some rocks had developed consciousness. Even some old trees could open their mouths to speak. The demonic ancestors' cauldron was glowing. There was a bizarre space inside it, and some bloody mist was lingering and drifting in this special life field. It was being nourished by the intense life energy. All of you have to live. Chu Feng prayed every day that he wouldn't be like this in the past. But now, because he cared too much, he was afraid he wouldn't be able to see those people again. He was using the famed mountains and some special domains left behind by the Sage Master to restore himself and the demonic ancestors' cauldron. There was the weapon-nurturing domain and the body-nurturing domain. So much so that he even went to the moon and paid a visit to the Sage Master's temporary imperial residence. In the end, Chu Feng's face was pale. His flesh and blood emerged and was reconstructed with great difficulty. He was still alive, but could the others reappear in the world? The last place Chu Feng wanted to go was the Eastern Sea and enter the true dragon's lair. This place seized the fortune of heaven and earth and was supported by the underwater mountains and rivers. It was an extremely precious land. In the personal notes of the domain researchers, there was mention of phoenix nests and dragon caves. If they could be truly arranged and used well, cultivators could sit cross-legged inside, while others could swallow mutant fruits. Meanwhile, domain experts could swallow the spiritual essence of the mountains and rivers. In Chu Feng's plan, he would use this kind of super method to find ancient immortal caves and ancestral veins once he entered the Yang realm. He would allow himself to rise violently. Otherwise, how could he slay Tai Wu? Chapter 949. The blue waves of the eastern sea undulated as Chu Feng rowed a small boat alone, drifting on the surface of the sea. There was no one to talk to him as he silently entered the sea in a daze. On the way to Mount Eternal, Chu Feng had a sad expression on his face as he recalled the grand occasion when they had gathered together. There had been battles, dangers, but also heroism and laughter. They had once joined hands to capture and kill the innocuous divine physique Zhou Shang, the myriad star physique Su Changxian, and the foreign allied forces. Of those who had gone through life and death together, he was the only one who had returned alive. Chu Feng was quiet and silent as he stood on the small boat. His silhouette seemed somewhat desolate as he sailed into the distance. As he neared the dragon lair, the eye of the sea was no longer hidden. Instead, it emerged from the sea and swallowed the waves. It looked extremely dangerous. Today, no dragoness appeared to receive him because she had already been killed by the Excalibur finger. Only a sliver of blood remained in the ancestral demon's cauldron, and it was unknown if she could appear again. Chu Feng was disappointed as he stared blankly at this place. Some people emerged from the sea in the distance. They were the people from Penglai Island and Fangzhang Island. They had been exploring the dragon lair recently, but unfortunately, they couldn't enter. They were stunned. When they emerged from the sea, they actually saw Chu Feng wandering here. Their expressions stiffened as they were extremely afraid of him. They secretly exclaimed that Chu Feng's life was truly tenacious. As expected, he didn't die. He could even come back alive after the Great Abyss had swallowed the Excalibur. No wonder there had been rumors in the starry sky recently that someone had found a few strands of his blood with activity outside the Great Abyss. He probably wasn't dead. Chu Feng was like a specter. He was silent and didn't look at them as he stood calmly on the surface of the sea. The people from the two islands braced themselves and respectfully and cautiously greeted Chu Feng. Their attitudes were very low. The person in front of them was someone who dared to fight to the death with the Yang realm. In addition to his previous fame, who wouldn't be afraid? Chu Feng didn't respond and was immersed in his own world. Upon seeing this, the people from the two islands immediately retreated and didn't disturb him. It's really Chu Feng. He survived. This is a big event. It will definitely be big news in the starry sky, a young man said excitedly. Shut up and pretend you didn't see anything. Hide it in your heart. An old man berated in a low voice. They had been very low-key during this period of time and had completely changed. Even when the people of the Yang realm invaded Earth, they didn't make any statements. The facts had proven that their choice at that time was incomparably correct. The people of Yingzhou had jumped out and tied up Mount Putua's Qianyi, Qianjia, and the others in a space as proof of allegiance. What was the result? In the end, Immortal Abode Island was destroyed. Whoosh! On the surface of the sea, the small boat disappeared. Chu Feng entered the sea eye, broke into the folded space, and appeared in front of the dragon nest. The Earth's comprehensive recovery had turned this place upside down. As soon as he entered, he heard the roar of a dragon. A large green dragon coiled around him and swooped down towards him. Chu Feng stood there without moving. That was draconic energy and not the resurrection of a true dragon. He held the magnetic marrow seal in his hand and pressed it forward lightly. Domain runes erupted in the vicinity, and the large dragon disappeared. This seal was a treasure in the eyes of domain researchers. It had been seized from the Origin magnetic sacred physique and could be used to execute domain techniques with twice the results with half the effort. The dragon lair was different. The old land beneath the sea was still in ruins, but it had also revealed a much more majestic area. Chu Feng could even see the soil stained with scarlet dragon blood and a few half-exposed dragon scales. Additionally, there were large patches of thunderstruck wood, all of which were important materials for building dragon nests. Now, They were emitting wisps of vigorous yang energy and exuberant vitality. In this area, there were clusters of dragon's bloodgrass. They were fragrant and emitting scarlet multicolored light. These were all great medicines. In the distance, there was an ancient cave carved into the side of the mountain. Waves of draconic cries rang out, and there were many thunderstruck trees. There were also reverse scale flowers and dragon embryo trees inside. They were swaying with divine multicolored light and blossoming with auspicious colors. They were filled with a strong fragrance and had all ripened. Within the cave, the draconic energy was surging and astonishingly dense. Chu Feng began to move. Piece after piece of magnetic stones, many of them containing divinity and were priceless materials, were arranged here by him. He was making arrangements according to the methods recorded in the Sage Master's inheritance he obtained from the moon. He was changing the dragon nest into a nirvana dragon cave. That day, the sky and earth were turned upside down under the sea eye. A myriad of phenomena rang out as draconic cries and Tao cries resounded. The direction of the mountains and rivers at the bottom of the sea changed and were greatly affected. Many marine race members were astonished to find that many of the divine objects in the earth veins, the spiritual energy within the trenches, and the essence of the sea mountains had been drawn away and were gathering towards a certain direction. A dragon nest. They were astonished, but they immediately made some associations. They turned around and left one after another, not daring to linger in the vicinity. 2 days later, a grand nirvana dragon nest was completely remodeled. Chu Feng entered with the demonic ancestral cauldron and went deep into the ancient cave paved with thunderstruck wood. This was the core area of the former dragon nest. Dense, immortal mist drifted about, and divine energy fluctuated intensely. He didn't collect the dragon bloodgrass, reverse scale flower, or dragon embryo tree. These were all priceless great medicines. If they were released to the outside world, they would inevitably cause a huge commotion. In his eyes, everything here was in service of rebirth. He wanted to use the dragon nest as an immortal furnace to try and revive everyone. Chi Chi Chi. This area was activated. Countless symbols extended outwards. Those were domain symbols blossoming. Chu Feng imitated the ancients, deducing the legends and truly arranging this type of land of rebirth. He didn't need to eat mutant fruits, but rather the essence of the mountains and rivers and the spiritual essence of the seabed. He used the dragon nest as a medium to gather everything and seize the natural luck contained within the world. Rumble. Heaven and earth trembled, and all living things revived. Even the most ordinary stalk of grass in the dragon nest erupted with a dazzling rain of light. It gathered the divine splendor of countless earth veins and great ravines at the bottom of the sea. The dragon nest was like a divine furnace. This place was too divine and extremely dazzling. A rain of light rustled down. This was a rain of spiritual essence, a pure wave that nourished all living things. Chu Feng sat down. The demonic ancestral cauldron stood there, rumbling. Everything was progressing in an orderly manner, developing according to Chu Feng's arrangements. The power of rebirth pervaded the air, representing new life. Exuberant life, energy surged. How is it? Chu Feng asked the demonic ancestral cauldron. He was apprehensive and uneasy. This was related to whether or not his family and friends could walk out alive. If even a land of rebirth didn't have any effects, then he truly was powerless. Everything would be for naught, and the sorrow and regret would be a heart-wrenching pain. The life field of my inner world has become more than 10 times stronger and is still increasing. However, it is almost to my limit. I don't know if they can survive either. The demonic ancestral cauldron wasn't certain. It had already done everything it could. Through this land of rebirth, it transmitted a sea of exuberant life force into its body. In this world, there were no heavenly deities. Moreover, they had already missed the optimal period of time Taiwu spoke of back then in the Great Abyss. Chu Feng and the demonic ancestral cauldron had no other way. They could only give it their all here. The sounds rang out incessantly, resonating with the mountains and rivers. Even in ancient times, this kind of scene was enough to shock the world. Someone was using the mountains and rivers to cultivate. This was definitely a major event in the evolutionary world. Ordinary domain researchers couldn't obtain this kind of inheritance because they simply didn't have this kind of method. In the past, there have been people who used the phoenix nest to transform and achieve a leap in life level. They became above the masses in one go, but those had already become legends. Now, the true rebirth was taking place. It swallowed the essence of the mountains and rivers and reproduced the grand scene recorded in the ancient books. For an entire 4 days, this place was filled with specks of scarlet multicolored light. White mist surged and golden light surged. Multicolored energy flowed and converged towards the center. The dragon blood grass, reverse scale flower, and dragon embryo tree grew frantically at first. After reaching the peak, they began to wither, and all of their essence entered the main position of the land of rebirth. Doubtlessly, the demonic ancestral cauldron absorbed the most. It constructed a special life field in order to revive those people. Chu Feng sat to one side. Even if he didn't absorb it, it wouldn't miss him. His body was recovering, and even though his face was as pale as paper, his true strength was increasing. He was evolving passively. At first, he didn't want to absorb a strand of energy, but it surged into his body on its own. The essence here was too dense, and it would be a waste if he didn't consume it. In the end, it would overflow and spread out from the dragon nest. 8 days later, the white mist thinned and the energy gradually dried up. They had used this land of fortune to its limit. All the fortunes in the dragon nest and the drainage of the surrounding mountains and rivers had reached an end. Chu Feng didn't want to evolve, but his own strength had unknowingly increased. He had undergone a great rebirth and stepped into the saint realm. In his original place, he shed off his mortal shell. It split apart with the wind and turned into ashes. His physical body emitted light as his life level rose to a higher level. He had become the youngest saint in the present age. His soul light was also fluctuating violently like a vast and mighty tide. His spiritual power circulated, and his body shone with myriad rays of multicolored light. Chu Feng wasn't happy in the slightest. This kind of evolution didn't give him any sense of accomplishment at all. All he wanted was for his parents to come back to life. He had long since pondered over his own path of evolution. Everything before his eyes wasn't what he wanted. How could he kill Tai Wu, Hunyi, and the other Empyreans with just these? He wanted to walk the path of the strongest. I only wish for you all to live. I want to hold a welcoming banquet for you all. I want to take you all with me to overlook the starry skies and dance with you all in the world of mortals. Chu Feng didn't ask for anything else. He only wished for them to live. He stretched out his trembling hand and touched the lid of the blood-stained cauldron. Then he suddenly opened it. Chapter 950. The lid of the cauldron opened, and a small world was formed inside. A bloody mist accompanied by dense life energy was churning and overflowing rapidly. It carried a faint smell of blood, as well as waves of cold and desolate aura. Chu Feng froze on the spot. The vigorous life energy he sensed was absorbed by the ancestral demons, cauldron from the land of rebirth, and not emitted by the bloody mist. In the blink of an eye, Chu Feng felt a chill from head to toe. He couldn't feel the familiar aura of his old friends. He didn't have their imprints, and he couldn't see their soul light. His ears were buzzing, and his vision was turning black. He was seeing stars, and blood flowed silently from the corner of his mouth. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. Chu Feng felt as though he had been struck by lightning. He couldn't breathe and was about to suffocate to death. He couldn't hear anything, and everything in front of him was pitch black. He supported the large cauldron powerlessly, and his body was trembling. He once harbored some hope, but now it had turned into despair. He had always been anxious and uneasy in his heart. But when the lid of the cauldron was opened and this extremely cruel truth was exposed, it was still difficult for him to bear. He couldn't hear anything. Both his ears were deaf and his eyes were blurry. He couldn't see anything, and there was only pain in his heart. He felt like he was sealed in an isolated dark space. Shu Feng's Adam's apple moved, but he could only make a hoarse sound. He couldn't cry even if he wanted to. There were no tears and only pain. His soul was about to suffocate, and his soul light dimmed as he sank into endless darkness. He couldn't struggle free and only felt endless suffering. He was walking alone in the sea of despair. There was no end to the dark space and the faint sea of bitterness. He felt like he was about to die. "Live, I only want you to live." His voice was hoarse and his body was trembling. He felt helpless and hopeless. This was completely different from the past him. He had never been so weak like a child. No one would have thought that this was Demon King Chu. His legs couldn't support his body, and he was about to collapse. His corporeal body couldn't bear his soul light and was flickering violently. Blood was dripping from his mouth, nose, and ears. After that, 2 streaks of blood slid down from his lifeless eyes. Chu Feng wanted to cry, but he couldn't. He was like an injured beast trapped in a land of despair. He couldn't feel anything in the outside world, and he was really sealed in darkness. He unconsciously supported the big cauldron. It was as if his soul had lost itself and could not find its way back. His mouth made a muffled sound, but it was neither crying nor laughing. It was just a kind of uncomfortable hoarse cry. After an unknown period of time, Chu Feng was finally able to breathe again. He struggled out of the darkness, gasping for air. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat, and his clothes were completely soaked. There was only a bloody mist inside the cauldron. There were no living beings. Whether it was his parents or the yellow cattle, none of them had survived. They had all died. The ancestral demon cauldron remained silent and did not say anything. How could this be? Even though he had guessed the worst, it really happened. He still felt as if a knife was twisting in his heart, and he almost fainted. "Dad, Mom, yellow cattle." Chu Feng called out their names. His tears finally flowed down as he recovered the corresponding bodily functions. He wanted to cry and howl. Everyone had died. Where's their soul light? Where are their true spirits? He searched with all his might. He searched the cauldron and the bloody mist, but he didn't see anything. Chu Feng was like an injured beast that had lost everything and was trapped on his own island. He howled deafeningly. He felt great sorrow in his heart, and it was difficult for him to restrain himself. He knelt on one knee here. He truly wished that he was just an ordinary person, and that he could spend his life peacefully with everyone else. Now, there was nothing left. He was the only one left. His parents' faces, warm words, concerned gazes, and the voices and smiles of other people all emerged as if it was only yesterday. After a long time, Chu Feng staggered and left the dragon nest. After that, he suddenly leapt into the eastern sea. He didn't move at all in the ice-cold water. He followed the waves and unconsciously went into the distance. During this time, there were sea beasts that swam over. Only then did they open their bloody mouths and flee far away in fear, bringing with them large waves. Chu Feng didn't move at all. He closed his eyes and wanted to sleep forever. He didn't want to wake up. He once again isolated himself from the world in his heart, and all he thought about were those people. Boom! After a long time, a spiritual mountain at the bottom of the sea shook violently. This was a sign of intense recovery. It was like an active volcano erupting. A large area of spiritual energy waves appeared, and even the drifting Chu Feng was attacked. He opened his eyes. They were dim and lifeless, but he still stood up in the end. He was in a daze as he walked alone. He was incomparably lonely and desolate as he headed towards the dragon nest. There was pain and sorrow in his heart, but he couldn't cry. He could only silently walk towards the place that hurt his spirit and heart. He wouldn't run away, but it was truly hard to bear, and his heart was in great pain. The ancestral demon's cauldron towered in the dragon nest's land of nirvana. It was still here, and it could only sigh at this result. Chu Feng knew from the very beginning that the chances of success were minuscule. Taiwu had once said that only a deity would have a way to save those people at the most optimal time, and there were no deities in the netherworld. But he still held onto some hope. He didn't ask for all of them to be revived, but he hoped that a few of them could reappear, even if they were just remnant souls. Now, there was nothing left. When we were in the great abyss, even though their soul light was dissipating, there was still some left behind. Is there nothing left now? They've disintegrated and turned into energy matter. They're drifting about in the cauldron and are no longer soul light. The ancestral demons cauldron informed. Chu Feng was dispirited and couldn't say anything. He carefully observed and sensed this kind of energy matter. His heart immediately went completely cold. This wasn't much different from Qin Luoyin's death. There was no longer a true spirit. Qin Luoyin's soul light should have disintegrated as well, but it was corroded by that golden matter and stuck together. It didn't disperse, but her true spirit had already dispersed. You're all gone. Chu Feng silently shed tears. His life had experienced great ups and downs during these few days, and he had experienced the most difficult and bitter darkness. Leave these matter behind. Don't bury them. I want to revive them. Chu Feng muttered with disappointment and sadness. He had lost his former sharpness. The soul light dissipated and divided into energy matter. In the end, these didn't disappear from the world and were suppressed by the ancestral demon's cauldron. Chu Feng held onto his last strand of hope as he waited for the light of dawn. In the end, the ancestral demon's cauldron shrunk. It discussed with Chu Feng that it wanted to enter the stone box and sleep. It felt that this was the Yang realm's most valuable treasure, and it was the weapon of the netherworld. It wanted to use this to sense it and see if it could recover. Chu Feng nodded and left this place with everything. Afterwards, he didn't say anything and didn't even shed a tear. He set off on his way alone, just like that. He stood in the eastern sea and couldn't see the dragoness or the figure on Mount Eternal. He turned around and left. However, his silhouette was a little lonely. He was gloomy and didn't say anything by himself. Chu Feng returned to the mainland. It was quiet and desolate. This was his own lonely journey without anyone to accompany him. That group of friends who jested with him in the past would never appear again. He returned to the small town at the foot of Mount Taihang and to his small two-story house. Yellow cattle had lived here for a long time back then, but now it was very cold and deserted. It was already late at night. Chu Feng didn't turn on the lights. He came to the rooftop and looked at the dim starlight. He was in a daze and full of sadness. He grew up here during his childhood and then moved away from this small town with his parents. Chu Feng lay on the rooftop without making a sound. He thought of his parents taking care of him here when he was young. They were afraid that he would be cold and afraid that he would be hot. They loved and protected him in all kinds of ways and watched him grow up. Those warm scenes and those two amiable faces seemed to appear in front of him all of a sudden. He reached out to touch them and approach them like he did when he was young, but there was nothing. His hands were empty and there was only the ice-cold night. Tears slid down from the corners of Chu Feng's eyes. He lay there silently. When the sky was about to brighten, he returned to his room and returned to his parents' bedroom. He sat there and then said nothing and didn't move. He stayed here for 3 days, constantly recalling every little detail of the past. All the experiences he had since he had memories of his childhood replayed in his heart. It was as if he had accompanied his parents on a journey again and lived together for more than 20 years. Then he left silently. No one knew that he had returned to his home in this small town. Chu Feng walked to the foot of Mount Taihang. In this mountainous region, he and Zhou Quan first met the yellow cattle. At that time, it was very mysterious and also very good at tormenting people. Zhou Quan was so angry that he kept calling it the bull demon. It was also precisely the yellow cattle that brought Chu Feng on the road of cultivation. In the early stages of the upheaval of heaven and earth and the recovery of the mountains and rivers, he began to evolve. His life's fate began to change from here. However, the yellow cattle was gone. Zhou Quan had also died and turned into a mist of blood. Even his soul light had disintegrated. He really wanted to see them again. When they were together, there was always joy and laughter. But now, he couldn't even speak. All he felt was lethargy. Chu Feng left. He walked through the mountainous region, passed through the forest, and headed all the way west. He arrived at Kunlun and sat on top of a mountain. He quietly watched the sunrise here alone. Back then, he drank in big bowls and ate big chunks of meat with a group of brothers. Even the old lama and the old grandmaster Wu Chifeng couldn't avoid being dragged into the water and raise their glasses with him. But now, the mountain breeze blew past, leaving behind a full sense of loneliness. Chu Feng took out a wine jar and poured cup after cup of wine. He drank a cup himself and then sprinkled the wine on the ground as a memorial to them. Brothers who have gone through life and death together, where are all of you? Who can fight shoulder to shoulder with me and charge into the world of the living? His words were blown away by the wind, leaving behind only a whimper. Chu Feng looked at the bright red rising sun, but didn't feel any warmth. Here he was very cold, lonely, and alone. His thoughts returned to the past as he sat on the mountain. During the Great War between the East and the West, it was at the foot of this mountain. The Mastiff King roared and fought against the Arctic King. The Rock King spread his wings and chased after the Black Dragon. The Black Yak contacted all parties and invited experts from all over the East. After the great battle, everyone chased and killed their way west. It was also at that time that he met the Siberian tiger who didn't have any moral integrity. Not long after, the Tiger King helped Chu Feng fight Schiller on Mount Longhu, and they became friends who went through trials and tribulations together. Later on, their relationship became closer, and the Tiger King also became a member of Mount Kunlun. There was also the old donkey with big buck teeth and pointed ears, as well as Ouyang Feng, who always looked at people with slanted eyes and constantly spitting saliva. They all joined Kunlun later on. Thinking of them would make people smile. But now, the mountain was silent. Everyone was already gone. Not long ago, this place was still very glorious. On the eve of the people of the Yang realm crossing over, all the races in the starry sky sent envoys to congratulate them. This place seemed to be flourishing, but in the end, it changed overnight. Before the calamity came, Qin Luoyin brought the little Taoist to Earth to warn Chu Feng. The divination grandmaster felt something was wrong and predicted that the sky would split. As expected, everything came true. Chu Feng was lost in thought. He felt sad and regretful. The little Taoist was still here, but Qin Luoyin met with misfortune not long after she came here to deliver the letter and warn him to be careful. At this time, he really had a bellyful of grief and indignation. He sat here and tightly clenched his fists. He was dejected and depressed. His parents, wife, and friends had left one by one. Although there were still many people and evolvers in this boundless world, he felt incomparably lonely. Chu Feng left Kunlun with tears hanging from the corners of his eyes. After a long time, he stood by the bank of the great river. Back then, he had brought Qin Luoyin and the little Taoist down the Yangtze River to admire the scenery along the way and see all the famous mountains and great rivers. When he arrived here, Chu Feng felt very tired. It was mainly because his heart was tired and his spirit was hurt. He lay on a bamboo raft and went down the great river. He didn't care and didn't care. He drifted wherever he wanted. He raised his head and looked at the sky. The figures of his parents, relatives, friends, and Qin Luoyin and the others appeared before his eyes again. He didn't want to move at all. He lay on the bamboo raft and went far away along the great river. This was his lonely journey. In the end, tears silently slid down from Chu Feng's eyes. He only looked at the sky and didn't want to do anything. His heart was very hurt. He missed those people, but he couldn't cry out loud. Chapter 9:51. Chu Feng lay on the bamboo raft. His eyes were dim and lifeless as he looked at the sky. He didn't make a sound as he drifted along with the great river into the distance. After an unknown period of time, the mist in the air gradually became thicker and the water flow gradually slowed down. He lay there and felt a strong energy and spiritual energy pervading the air. The sunset glow was very red, but it was somewhat like blood. It passed through the mist and sprinkled on this place. The dark red circulated and was somewhat sorrowful. Chu Feng sat up. Where was this place? He didn't know how long he had been drifting for. Now, he had entered a group of lakes. He carefully identified and silently recalled. He knew where this place was, Yunmeng Marsh. He sat quietly and no longer lay on his back. Chu Feng's state of mind gradually calmed down. The gloominess in his body was disappearing, and his entire person was in the process of recovery. He knew that he couldn't sink into depravity. All the sorrow he should have had flowed out today. In the future, he wouldn't have time to be weak and depressed. From now on, he would become a demon king. The days still had to pass, and the road still had to be walked. However, he had to premeditatedly conquer the Yang realm. To some people, he was destined to be called a great demon king. In truth, he didn't want to kill people. But having reached this step, how could he live up to the title of Demon King Chu if he didn't kill the celestial venerables and shake the major sects of the Yang realm? Actually, I only like to be a happy human trafficker. Chu Feng mocked himself. He didn't need to resent the world or blame himself. He dispelled his sorrow and only wanted to calmly walk on. He wanted to adjust himself and become a happy demon king. He knew that if his parents and those people were still alive, they would also want him to live happily. We'll meet again one day. It won't be too far away. Chu Feng jumped up and arrived in outer space. Since he had already considered his future path, he had to let go now and fight. He looked at the stars and the darkness. He raised his head, and from now on, there would be no more tears. There was only fighting spirit and a smile. Although he couldn't smile now, he didn't want to carry a heavy burden and let the bitterness press down on him. He told himself that everything would get better. Gently patting the stone box, Chu Feng awakened the demonic ancestral cauldron inside. Time to wake up. He asked how the ancestral demon cauldron felt and how it was doing now. A small cauldron appeared, exuding an ancient aura. Most of the cracks on its surface had healed, but there were still some fine patterns that had yet to disappear. That day, the great martial heavenly lord's finger pointed over. Even though it was suppressed to the illuminator level, the superposition of various types of energy bodies was still terrifying. It was comparable to an attack from a deity. It's still lacking a bit of maturity. The demonic cauldron almost broke apart this time. It suffered heavy damage, so it needed a few rare materials to repair itself. Chu Feng took out a bracelet from the space inside the stone box. It was sparkling with starlight, and at the same time, there were tiny black spots on it, like the appearance of a black hole in the universe. This was the Star Mother Gold bracelet, obtained from a myriad star physique Su Changxian. It was the most precious crude Mother Gold weapon, and it had yet to develop its own complete order. Chu Feng handed it over and placed it into the cauldron, allowing the demonic ancestral cauldron to melt and absorb it. It had Mother Gold components on its own, so if its hands were slippery, it wouldn't be a problem for the cracks to be repaired. The demon ancestral cauldron was embarrassed. This great gift was seriously too precious. You should recover quickly. We still have some things to do. Chu Feng didn't allow it to decline. At the same time, he put on an even more special Mother Gold bracelet, the Diamond Chakram, on his wrist. Chu Feng steered the green bamboo boat and activated it with saint-level energy. He crossed the starry sky and found an ancient teleportation domain on an abandoned planet. From then on, he began to enter the depths of the universe again. He found an ancient mine in the starry sky. It was the place where the machine race's ancient Vajra ancestor had hibernated. This was the best place for metal life forms to heal. The demon ancestral cauldron stayed here and began to seize the time to recover. After that, Chu Feng set out on his way alone. The people from the Yang realm retreated. At least, they didn't dare to show themselves in the near future. The edge of the universe regained its tranquility, and the terrifying ship emitting surging yang qi could no longer be seen. Even a celestial venerable had fallen in the battle of the Great Abyss. The storm and influence it caused were really too great. Even though many days had passed, it was still the most popular topic. Of course, Chu Feng, Yao Yao, and the others, including the Thunder God and the Skyblade, were also constantly mentioned. Chu Feng entered the most flourishing place in the Yang realm universe, the abandoned city. the primogenitor of the dragon race, who had personally mentioned the number one expert in the Yang realm race, had once overseen this place. Tens of millions of years ago, the demon ancestral master had also overseen this place. This was his place of seclusion. Later on, this place was destroyed and turned into ruins. It was only 5 million years ago that it gradually prospered and became a transit station for various galaxies. It was the closest to the stars where the top 10 races of the universe resided. As a result, it once again flourished. The orthodoxy here couldn't be said to be very strong, but it was good at doing business. It gathered financial resources from all directions. There were many transaction records of divine medicines, breathing techniques, scriptures, and so on. Of course, there was no lack of secret treasures. Chu Feng came not for medicinal herbs or breathing techniques, but to take one last look at this universe. More importantly, he wanted to understand the current situation. You all sympathize with Chu Feng and feel that the Thunder God, and the Skyblade's fates are too miserable. But I don't think so. It's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Why bother? If they didn't engage in the so-called bloody battle, the Yang realm wouldn't be so miserable. Do you see? It's because these people didn't yield. In the end, the people from the Yang realm stretched out their hands and directly destroyed several stars. It's all because of them. In a bustling street, someone was talking loudly in a restaurant facing the street. This kind of words naturally caused a lot of people to be dissatisfied and clamor. How can you say that? Do you think that we should kneel here and wait for the people of the Yang realm to come over? Then, we'll decide our fate based on their mood. Whether we're killed, tortured, or let go, we shouldn't resist. The middle-aged man who spoke earlier sneered and said, "Attacking when you can't beat them? This is overestimating your own strength, and is truly unwise." It's not that I want to criticize the Thunder God, but he really can't keep his integrity in his old age. He really shouldn't have attacked, and should have just retired peacefully. There's also that Chu Feng. That demon should know his place a little more. If he were to consider the overall situation, he should have been captured by the people from the Yang realm. In the end, he didn't give in. In order to kill him, the people from the Yang realm went to war and harmed many innocent people. Immediately, the group of people exploded. Someone reprimanded. "Why do I feel that you're born to be a wretched wretch? In your eyes, the people from the Yang realm are superior and powerful. Everything is right, but it's wrong for us to even resist?" That person shook his head and said, "It's always been like this. If we didn't jump out to engage in this so-called resistance, the people from the Yang realm might stop even if they killed a group of people. It's not that I want to criticize Heaven Blade, Thunder God, and Demon Chu, but they really overestimate their own strength." Naturally, this area couldn't calm down and a heated debate broke out. Although there were very few evolvers who agreed with that person's point of view, there were indeed a few people who made some of the older generation people's faces twitch in anger. They pointed at those people with flushed faces. "Scum, if you see the experts from the Yang realm coming over and making you kneel on the ground and not kill you, you'll feel that it's a great favor. If they throw you a few bones, will you wag your tail? The evolvers from our side, Thunder God, Flower of the Red Spider Lily, and Heaven Blade, go on expeditions and slaughter. Even if they bleed and lose their lives, they'll perish together with the enemy. You don't feel grateful because you're not strong enough. How servile. Who are you scolding, old man?" That middle-aged man was humiliated and angry. Chu Feng watched and listened quietly. After understanding the situation here, he was indifferent to life and death. He was about to go to the Yang realm cosmos, so he didn't care about these trivial matters at all. At this time, someone said, "You can be so stubborn. Chu Feng might not necessarily die like this, but if he comes out, he'll definitely slap you to death." That middle-aged man curled his lips in disdain and said, "After so many days, we've only found a few strands of so-called living blood he left behind. I reckon there's no value in it. This demon is already dead. Moreover, so what if he comes out? He should be half-crippled. Besides, he has to be reasonable. What reason is there to reason with you?" Someone berated. Chu Feng listened for a moment and felt that it was too noisy. He walked over just like that, and suddenly, the bustling place became extremely quiet. It was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone was flabbergasted. Some people were trembling, some were excited, and some were scared out of their wits. They were talking like this, and the main character had suddenly appeared. Chu Feng, what are you doing? The person who was talking nonsense just now was trembling in fear and kept on retreating. Bang! Chu Feng didn't say anything and only pressed forward lightly. Then this person started to disintegrate from his feet up and continuously disappeared. This person shouted in horror. You can't do this. If you have something to say, we can talk it out. If you have something to say, we can talk it out slowly. You already said I'm a demon, so what's there to talk about? From today onwards, I'll be a demon king, Chu Feng said calmly. He didn't have much to say to this kind of person. He walked into the distance and left this so-called ruined capital. Not long after, he paid a visit to all the powerful races one by one, including the races left behind by the top 10. Of course, he hurried over in secret to give these evolutionary sects a strong sense of uneasiness. They all felt a great headache because they didn't know why he was visiting them. They were deeply afraid. He was someone who dared to fight to the death with the Yang realm. Even the heavenly deities had died, yet he was still alive. This made everyone feel restraining fear. They all felt their hair stand on end after learning that he was visiting them. Chapter 952. Chu Feng traveled all the way and arrived outside the ancient mine where the demon ancestral cauldron was buried. He stood guard there. There were discussions about him everywhere in the starry sky. The reappearance of the great demon, Chu Feng, caused a great commotion. The Yang Jian celestial lord had died in the abyss, but he had survived. Some people thought that they were on Demon King Chu's must-kill list. Every day felt like a year. They were anxious and fearful as they hid in an uninhabited part of the universe. There were also people who were excited and had heated discussions on Black Blood, Origin Beast, and other platforms. However, all of this had nothing to do with Chu Feng. He did not have the leisure to care about this. He was quietly waiting for the demonic tripod to come out of seclusion. At this moment, there was a small crack in the sea of chaos. No one knew that this was a small path. It was extremely ancient and connected the netherworld cosmos and the broken chaotic cosmos. Now, there was someone on the road. Her silver hair hung down to her waist, her figure tall and slender, her back beautiful. She stepped on the secret path she had walked thousands of years ago and approached the front. If Chu Feng were here, he would definitely recognize that this was the woman from the ancient mine at the foot of Mount Kunlun. She used to hide on Earth. After countless years, she shed her skin and was reborn from the dead. At the same time, Yao Yao's grandfather had also looked for her and asked her for medicine to save Yao Yao. This was a woman from the Yang realm who was hiding on Earth. When someone invaded and disturbed her, she once appeared from Kunlun with a pair of silver door panels and killed the Illuminator from the underworld universe. Now, she was on her way to the Chaos verse alone. To be more precise, she was smuggling. The world is balanced. The suffering that I have experienced will eventually be compensated in the world of the living. My dynasty, my people, and the Empyreans of my race. You have all been decaying for tens of millions of years. No matter how great and glorious your past was, it will all be forgotten by the people of the world. I will rise and rebuild a flourishing era. Her voice was soft but firm. It was obvious that no ordinary person could destroy such a powerful empire. At the very least, there had to be a heavenly venerable behind the scenes. The silver-haired woman was about to leave. She wanted to use this rare opportunity to return to the world of the living. There would be a wider stage there, and it wouldn't restrict the limits of her growth. The highest point in the netherworld was only the Illuminator, and one could see the end of the road at a glance. and her enemy was unimaginably powerful. Only by going to the Yang realm could she soar above the 9 heavens would she have the chance to become a top expert. I'm sorry, some people in the netherworld. I've lived here for many years, but I wasn't able to help you because I want to live. I want to kill my way into the world of the living and shake the foundations of some of the masterminds. She had died back then. She had transformed with her old memories and was just now. It was the best time to enter the Yang realm. People of the Yang realm, you guys have opened up the path. It just so happens that I can borrow it. The will of the heavens allows me to return. Otherwise, she couldn't Yang's way. The way and she could. Was. Back then, the reason she was able to come here was because of an accident. In that extremely powerful battle, the race's Empyrean had broken through the 2 realms before his death. World and of realm and world heaven. There was a somber atmosphere in the broken, chaotic universe. Raging waves beat against the shore, and undercurrents surged. The death of a Tao body of the great martial heavenly lord was a gargantuan event. The people who stayed were uneasy. They were afraid that realm would blame them, especially Jiangzhou, Su Hong, and the others. No one went to the Yang realm. They were afraid that realm heaven would blame them, especially Jiangzhou, Su Hong, and the others who had recovered. It was precisely after they fled back that they reported to the great martial heavenly lord that they discovered the ultimate treasure of the Yang realm, causing him to be on his way. The silver-haired woman was called Ming Chuan. She entered the chaotic universe and took out a secret treasure. She lit a broken bronze lamp. Back then, Ming Chuan's clan was able to establish an eternal dynasty and control millions of miles of land. Naturally, they had the support of a heaven lord. Otherwise, how could they occupy a piece of fertile land in the Yang realm? Unfortunately, the clan's heavenly venerate was killed by someone in the end. This doomed the clan's decline. This copper lamp was precisely left behind by that heavenly deity. Even though it was a damaged artifact, after being nurtured for so many years, it could be lit again. This was enough to prove that there was something wrong with it. It could protect her as she passed through this trial. Ming Chuan didn't dare to activate it in the Yang realm. She was afraid of being swallowed by the abyss. Once she entered the Yang realm, she didn't have to worry about being divined by the divine masters. In the Yang realm, the order of heaven and earth was perfect. The great Tao was vast and grand. No one could divinate the mysteries of heaven, especially those with peerless ancient weapons. They could disturb the weather, making it even more difficult to be divined. The old weasel had said this to Chu Feng. He dared to attack in the Yang realm, but he didn't dare to act so recklessly in the Yang realm. That was because the Yang realm was broken. In their eyes, it was just a narrow space. It wasn't a truly orderly world. They even suspected that the world Chu Feng and the others were in wasn't the real Yang realm. On this day, a flame burned. A silver-haired woman rushed over on the small path that connected the chaotic universe and the Yang realm. Along the way, people were awakened and hurriedly tried to stop her. In the end, they were turned to ashes. This small path was extremely dangerous. Complete chaotic lightning streak passed from time to time. Some were as red as blood, and some were silver. It was enough to kill a divine king. It was too terrifying. The silver-haired woman was scared but not hurt. She followed this small path and rushed to the other shore she wanted to reach. Under the gentle light of the green lamp, she forcefully crossed over. That day, the disciples of the few sects were shaken. The chaotic universe was in an uproar. The celestial venerable had just died, but someone killed their people without the slightest scruple and sneaked into the Yang realm. In this battle, one of the gods died. He was burned to ashes by the celestial venerable's fire lamp. The death substitution talisman exploded. Because the difference in level wasn't small, it wasn't effective. The number of illuminators that died exceeded the number of fingers on 2 hands. As for some of the younger disciples, they were even more miserable. They didn't even have time to groan before a batch of them died. In the chaotic universe, the Taiwu, Hunyi, Yuanshu, and chaotic universe were shaken. This time, they were caught unprepared. However, it also exposed the problem of their carelessness. In particular, The main gods followed the Taiwu to the Yang realm and died one after another. There weren't many gods left, and there was only one person overseeing the path. Chase, I don't believe she can pass through the boundary membrane of the Yang realm. Jiang Zhou and Su Hongdar roared. At the same time, their faces turned pale. This could be considered their most serious dereliction of duty. Letting a creature from this universe enter the Yang realm could be a big or small matter. If someone really targeted them, it would definitely be a great crime. In the end, they were disappointed. They didn't catch up. Ming Chuan used the green lamp to launch the strongest attack. She passed through the boundary membrane and successfully broke into the Yang realm. I'm back. She carried the awakened celestial venerable's ancient lamp. Her beautiful face was full of excitement as she breathed in large mouthfuls of abundant yang qi. From now on, she could leap freely in the sea and fly freely in the sky. She disappeared in an instant. She would conceal her identity and quietly wait for her rise. A cloud of gray fog appeared at the boundary membrane of the Yang realm. With a whoosh, it also charged through the gap that hadn't closed yet. It let out a cold laugh that made one's hair stand on end. In the end, it disappeared between heaven and earth. She's Empress Ming Chuan. In the chaotic universe, the old weasel screamed. It divined and deduced who Ming Chuan was through the traces left behind by her. Back then, she was the last empress of that dynasty in the underworld ridge zone. Jiang Zhou sucked in a breath of cold air. That was an old matter from tens of millions of years ago. Young Empress Ming Chuan's talent was exceptional. In the vast Yang realm, she was considered a super genius and ranked at the peak. Unfortunately, her fate wasn't good. She became the last empress of that dynasty. Moreover, she was hastily elected after the old emperor died, and there was no one to inherit the throne. At that time, the dynasty was about to collapse and the clan was about to be exterminated. She was far from mature. Many people knew about that period of history. A dynasty supported by a celestial venerable was destroyed. The mastermind behind the scenes was terrifying to death. It was suspected that more than one celestial venerable intervened. In the Yin realm universe, the place where the machine race's ancient Vajra ancestor was once buried erupted with splendor and auspicious multicolored light. The demon ancestral cauldron rushed out and repaired itself. The demon cauldron had completely absorbed the star mother gold bracelet, the rarest and most precious material in the world. It fused into one, and specks of patterns appeared on the cauldron's walls. You've recovered? Chu Feng asked. He'd been sitting here for several days. Relying on the mother gold you gave me, I've improved even more. The demon ancestral cauldron was grateful from the bottom of its heart. Where was he going next? What was he going to do? The demon ancestral cauldron asked him. Return to Earth first, said Chu Feng. Okay. With the demon ancestral cauldron by his side, he didn't need to use the teleportation domains on some planets. He could directly pierce through heaven and earth and cross the Yin realm starry sea in an instant. It definitely wouldn't work in the Yang realm. The order of heaven and earth was complete, and the backlash of the laws would make even the gods tremble. Before long, they arrived in outer space and looked down at the land flourishing with life below. I see that you're deeply worried. What's on your mind? Asked the demon ancestral cauldron. Chu Feng was very solemn as he said, I'm going to do something big and go crazy for once. But before that, I need to resolve my worries and fulfill a promise. The demon ancestral cauldron was silent. What worries did the current Chu Feng have? The people around him had all died. He was alone and extremely miserable. What are you going to do? Asked the demon ancestral cauldron. Before going crazy, I want to ensure that I can see my parents, Luoyin, and Yellow Cattle one last time. I want to resolve all my hidden worries. The demon ancestral cauldron was stunned. Chapter 9:53. In the purgatory, Chu Feng had come again. It was pitch black and boundless. This area was like a part of the void of the universe that had been cut off. Regardless of whether it was high or low in the sky, There were some meteorites floating in an irregular arrangement. This old demon is scared. I don't want to die yet. The demon ancestral cauldron was almost stuttering. It never would have thought that Chu Feng would bring it here. What is this place? The Netherworld universe was a place that no one dared to mess with. If there was nothing to do, they would hide as far away as they could. Who would dare to come in and be impudent? However, Chu Feng came, moreover carrying hope and longing. His eyes carried a mysterious brilliance, as if he was searching for the path to immortality. Demon Cauldron couldn't help but seriously remind him. Back then, even Demon Ancestor withdrew not long after entering. His expression was unpleasant, because he sensed an indescribable great terror. The Demon Ancestor was a creature that had broken through the limits of this universe. It was on par with the strongest expert in the prehistoric era, the Dragon Ancestor. Even he was afraid. The demonic ancestor once said that the more powerful one is, the more one would revere this place. Chu Feng glanced at it and naturally understood that it was reminding him that he was not strong enough. The ignorant were fearless. Just follow me. I've told you before that I've walked this path before. Seeing how calm Chu Feng was, Demonic Cauldron really had nothing to say. Not long after, they arrived at the Radiant Ghost City. Even though it was not his first time here, Chu Feng was still exceptionally cautious and solemn. The Radiant City of Death illuminated the dark purgatory, making this region shine brilliantly. It was majestic and tall, ancient and full of vicissitudes, as if it had existed for millions and millions of years. Outside the city, there were corpses everywhere, ranging from golden arhats to beings of higher realms. There were void rats, golden-winged celestial rocks, bug kings, immortal birds. There were many races. Whoosh! Chu Feng quickly climbed up the ghost city. Standing here, the scene in the city was even more shocking, making even the demonic cauldron tremble, feeling waves of uneasiness. In the city, there was a sea of corpses piled up from the ground to the top of the city walls. The most terrifying thing was the shockingly huge millstone. It occupied a third of the ghost town's area and slowly rotated, crushing the corpses that landed on it into a bloody paste. Soon after, the corpses in the city were all gone, disappearing into the millstone. Blood splashed everywhere, bloody mud flowing everywhere. Very quickly, a sea of corpses fell from the endless void, filling up the radiant city of death once again. Chu Feng once suspected that these corpses were gathered here after the people of the underworld died, but now it seemed that this was not the case at all. His strength was no longer the same as it was in the past, now that he could move freely in the starry sea of the Netherworld universe. He didn't notice the abnormal phenomenon of a large number of corpses disappearing. He seriously suspected that in some terrifying world, there were indescribable passageways, or some unfathomable creature that interfered with everything, sending over a sea of corpses from other realms to maintain everything. Perhaps it is some indescribable natural law that goes round and round, carrying out all of this. Chu Feng sighed again, guessing like this. He had come here more than once, studying this city. It felt too ancient, always feeling like this place had existed for hundreds of millions of years, just too long. Who could live for so long? Even the celestial venerables should have died a long time ago. Even the powerhouses that didn't come into being in a young realm should have dried up and died. Since no creature could live for so long, then it could only be a kind of instinctive law of heaven and earth. Is this the reincarnation land of innate existence? The demonic ancestral cauldron asked. Chu Feng sighed and said, some people guess that this was arranged by someone and not naturally formed by heaven and earth. But who could live for so long, exceeding hundreds of millions of years? Who could silently look down on all life, watching as the creatures of the universe grew old and died? Some of these words were said by the old foxes of the foreign realm. Even such figures were afraid of everything in purgatory. They had once warned Chu Feng not to say too much and not to mention it again. The more powerful one was, the more they feared this place. Chu Feng calmed down. The reason he came here was because he already had no other choice. He wanted to make one last effort. The demonic ancestral cauldron carried the bloody mist of Chu Feng's parents, Yellow Cattle, Big Black Yak, and the others. Meanwhile, the stone box directly stored Qin Luoyin's corpse. After a long period of silence, Chu Feng decided to give it a try. He would use the stone box to bring everyone to the end of the reincarnation path and beg the clay idol to save him. I know I might be overestimating my abilities and shouldn't have alarmed that kind of existence, but I really don't have any other way out. I only want them to come back to life. Chu Feng spoke and invited the demonic ancestral cauldron into the stone box. However, he was disappointed as soon as he was about to enter the city of death. Just like last time, the stone box didn't protect those people and was going to expel them. It wanted to throw them into the city. Chu Feng broke out in cold sweat. How could it be like this? Now, everyone was placed into the stone box. It wasn't like last time when the space inside the stone box hadn't been opened and Qin Luoyin's corpse couldn't be placed inside. The reality was very cruel. He still couldn't bring these people across. For a moment, Chu Feng was lost in thought. Could it be that he only had one last path to try? But he really wasn't resigned to it. I'll send you out. Wait for me. Chu Feng brought along the demonic ancestral cauldron and rushed out of the purgatory with extreme speed. After that, he used the soul bell to fix Qin Luoyin's corpse in place. He also moved out the stone box and handed it over to the demonic ancestral cauldron to guard. He set off alone and went to the end of the reincarnation path. He disregarded everything and went to see the clay idol to carry out his final effort and attempt. This time, his speed was very fast. With the little Taoist black talisman in hand, he soared into the sky and could fly. He wasn't like before when he could only travel on foot. Even so, it still took Chu Feng several days to complete a round trip. He really borrowed the path from the radiant city of death and went to the end of the reincarnation path. But when he returned, he was dazed out of his wits and returned without accomplishing anything. He saw the clay idol, but the other party didn't give him any response. It was just a clay idol. After returning, he sat in Kunlun for a day and a night. In the end, he got up and said, "I knew it would be like this, but I won't be resigned to it if I don't try my best." In fact, after experiencing a near-death calamity, Chu Feng had experienced the power of the extreme martial realm in the Great Abyss, as well as the Celestial Venerable's most crucial callousness and ruthlessness. He had a feeling that the further one walked on the path of evolution, the more apathetic the ultimate evolvers would be when they had nowhere else to go. When that kind of existence evolved to a later stage, they were almost like the great Tao that the ancient sages spoke of. They looked down on all living things without joy, worry, or emotion. What kind of person was he, and what kind of existence was the clay idol? They couldn't be mentioned in the same breath at all. How could that kind of existence pay attention to him and respond to him? But he wasn't resigned to it. He cared too much and couldn't bear to part with his parents and friends. That was why he tried and worked hard, even though he was extremely disappointed to return without accomplishing anything. It wasn't unexpected. Chu Feng knew that when he first saw the clay idol, he could only be said to be fearless because he was ignorant. If that clay idol really was a living creature, then his previous boldness, sitting on the same platform as it really was too much. Meanwhile, if the clay idol was still alive and had perception, perhaps it would only treat him like a bug that landed at its side, not willing to pay him any attention. The more he thought about it, the more terrifying it became. Chu Feng went to that fox that was about to be completely petrified, yet even it felt reverence towards the path of reincarnation, not daring to mention the clay idol too much. Just how terrifying was this? We finally reached this step. He carried sadness. There was only one path left. He was extremely clear-headed, recognizing reality. Those hopes he placed on others couldn't be relied on in the end. By doing that, he walked the path of reincarnation again, all because he wasn't willing to give up, grabbing all possibilities. "Let's head to Radiant City of Death again," Chu Feng said. The demonic ancestral cauldron followed him. entering the purgatory again and approaching the radiant city of death. Our world is full of suffering, like a gloomy cage. The people of the Yang realm call it a cemetery, a mass grave. Even though it makes one feel unhappy and angry, there's also a bit of reason. Let's break away from this place. I hope you all can reincarnate into the Yang realm, and we will meet again in the Yang realm. Chu Feng was extremely emotional. This was his final hope. He was extremely tired, and there really wasn't any other way. This was the only path he could take. I believe that your true spirits still exist and haven't completely disappeared. Chu Feng spoke. If those people's true spirits already no longer existed, then he would truly feel all hope turn to dust and despair. He knew that one more day of delay meant one more risk. If the bloody mist within the demonic ancestral cauldron dissipated as time went on, then perhaps there really wouldn't be any hope left. He wanted to give a try and send them to the afterlife. In the end, Chu Feng held onto the black talisman, the stone box, and Qin Luoyin. Moreover, he let the demonic ancestral cauldron pour out the bloody mist and the energy substance after the soul light's decomposition. He wanted to personally protect and send them off. In reality, after approaching the ghost town, the stone box no longer paid attention to the bloody mist and corpses. It only emitted a weak and sparkling luster on Chu Feng's body. Chu Feng was incomparably nervous. He placed the black talisman beside the bloody mist, energy substance, and Qin Luoyin. He followed them forward and finally entered the stone millstone. Ayo! In a split second, a mournful howl came from the originally quiet place. It broke the eternal tranquility and made Chu Feng's scalp go numb. His body was ice cold as if there was a corpse lying on his back. It was as if a malicious spirit was crouching on his back. Ayo! It wasn't just one sound. Too many howls rang out around Chu Feng from within the bloody mist. He saw one terrifying creature after another. They were too malevolent. Those weren't his parents, yellow cattle, Qin Luoyin, and the others, but something else. They were too terrifying as they screamed and roared loudly. These bizarre creatures seemed to have surpassed malicious spirits and represented the extreme danger. What was this? Chu Feng was convinced that this wasn't seeping out from the crushed corpses, but from the bloody mist in the demonic cauldron. It was also coming from Qin Luoyin's surroundings. Chu Feng felt as if he had fallen into an ice house. His body was bone-piercingly cold. Why was this happening? The huge stone millstone rotated slowly. It was incomparably coarse as the corpses in the surroundings shattered and turned into a bloody paste. The scene was terrifying. At this time, a row of golden runes on the millstone shone brightly and pierced Chu Feng's eyes with pain. The beam of light illuminated the area, causing his parents, yellow cattle, and the others to let out malicious spirits' wails. The scene was even more miserable. Chu Feng felt as if his scalp was about to explode. But it was also at this time that he was astonished and overjoyed. He almost shouted out loud. He saw a few familiar faces. They were very faint as they emerged from the bloody mist. There were his parents, big black, yellow cattle, and the others. They were almost transparent and so faint that they almost didn't exist. At the same time, the mournful cries were still there. They gradually became visible in the rough millstone's golden beam of light. Those were wisps of gray mist. Chu Feng understood everything in a split second. Those so-called wails and malicious spirits' cries were actually the strange foreign substance entangling these people's bodies. He drew in a breath of cold air. They had already restrained themselves during those years in the foreign land. In the end, they didn't cultivate mutant techniques, but in the end, they were still entangled with these terrifying things. If they hadn't personally come here to experience reincarnation, they probably wouldn't have understood how terrifying they were until they died. It was too horrifying. Chu Feng's head was as big as a bucket. He had to experience reincarnation. This was really too terrifying. I'm suffocating to death. At this time, Big Black Yak's weak and almost transparent soul light actually let out a voice. It was very weak and small. Chapter 954. I'm dying of suffocation. I'm dying of suffocation. Why do I feel like I've fallen into a dead sleep, trapped in a nightmare that I can never wake up from? Finally, I can speak. After Big Black Yak opened his mouth, even though he was in a weak soul-light state, he made an action of gasping for breath as though he was a drowning person who had been saved. Pooh! Ouyang Fong spat out his saliva out of habit, but in the end he spat out a wisp of soul light. His body became increasingly faint and almost dissipated. He was so frightened that he let out a strange cry and did his best to suck in his saliva. Old Donkey was in a daze. He touched the saliva that had been spat on his face. When he came back to his senses, he immediately fought with the Ouyang mythological beast and shouted, "Hee-haw, hee-haw, mythological beast, Grandpa, Donkey will fight it out with you." The two of them were fighting. Yellow Cattle, Zhou Quan, and the Manchurian Tiger had all revived. One after another, familiar faces appeared before his eyes. Chu Feng was so excited that his body was trembling. His hopes had finally come true. These people had reappeared. Not long ago, he was still worried that this path would end in vain, and he would fall into complete despair. After all, only a bloody mist was left of these people. Their soul light had disappeared, and they had been decomposed into energy matter. Their entire imprint in this world had completely disappeared. However, he still firmly believed that the so-called true spirit, the core of a person's consciousness, should still be there, hidden in that energy substance, even though he couldn't sense it. Now, everything was in its best form. Roar! In the surroundings, a mournful cry pulled everyone back to reality. The stone millstone flickered with golden symbols as it obliterated the gray substance. All kinds of terrifying figures appeared, extremely terrifying. Old Donkey couldn't be bothered to quarrel with divine beast Ouyang, and the Black Yak also shut up. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts as they stood there quietly, watching everything in astonishment. Chu Feng was shaken. He saw many species appearing from the gray matter. There was a six-winged sky dragon with blood dripping from its eyes, a three-legged immortal bird with a pitch-black body and no holy aura to speak of, and a golden-winged rock with an evil aura and a venomous look in its eyes. Then their bodies changed again. After exploding, they turned into gray matter, and then they reassembled again. Some of them turned into ancient figures that wore heavenly deity robes, and some of them turned into mysterious statues that sat high up in the nine heavens. However, their eyes were all dripping with blood, or evil energy overflowed into the heavens. They were sinister and sinister, extremely abnormal. Bang! Within the golden light, they exploded again. The gray matter surged, not willing to be obliterated, struggling intensely. As the celestial arch, I shall rule the world. As the gray mist churned, a figure appeared, sitting cross-legged on a prayer mat. He was surrounded by all sorts of prostrating figures, all of whom were prostrating themselves in worship. However, the eyes of the figures sitting on the prayer mat were also dripping with blood, and the bodies of those who were prostrating themselves were covered with wounds and black blood. Boom! On the millstone, the golden runes flew out and directly pressed down, turning into a huge golden hand, grinding the figure on the praying mat and the creatures of the various races to pieces. Roar! Mournful howls rang out. The gray mist churned and turned into all sorts of faces that cried out in pain. They were incomparably malevolent, and their eyes were cold as they stared at Chu Feng and the others. They seemed to be unconvinced by the millstone. Unfortunately, it still broke apart, crushed until it vanished into thin air, no longer existing. What is this thing? What is its origin? After making a trip to the other side, they actually came into contact with this type of extremely heaven-defying substance, making everyone shiver with fear, feeling horrified. If he hadn't come here, Chu Feng wouldn't have known that the consequences would be so serious. Everyone seemed to be shouldering the weight of a malicious spirit. It was too terrifying. Was that a type of creature, a strange substance, or some kind of evil curse law? Chu Feng punched the Black Yak, Yellow Cattle, Zhou Quan, and Ouyang Feng one after another. Then, he arrived at his parents' side. These two were actually infected by the gray substance just now because they came into contact with the bloody mist. Dad, Mom. Chu Feng's voice trembled slightly. He originally thought he would never see them again in this life, but who would have thought that he would succeed here and rescue these people from the bloody mist and energy substance? Child. Little Feng, Chu Ziyuan and Wang Jing were both trembling slightly as they recalled the last moments of their lives. They had some guesses and knew that this was the meeting between life and death. Brother, where are we? The Black Yak asked. The group of people had endless things to say, but they were also very curious. Purgatory, City of Death, under the millstone. Chu Feng informed and briefly explained the general situation. Everyone was stunned. They had come to the side of the reincarnation path and were going to be formatted and be reborn from then on. They were truly courageous. After they found out what Chu Feng had done, their feelings were complicated. They were touched, disappointed, and nostalgic. It turned out that they had already reached the end of this life and were now truly dead. If it wasn't for Chu Feng, even their soul light would have been extinguished. Chu Feng supported Chu Ziyuan and Wang Jing and looked at this group of people. His pupils contracted, and he felt a wave of discomfort in his heart. After all, some great demons were missing, and some people had completely disappeared. The Kongdong Mountain Tortoise was gone. The Black Bear King had also completely disappeared, and the Golden Winged Rock King was nowhere to be seen. The Big Baldy Horse King's shadow emerged with difficulty from the energy substance after a bit of broken soul disintegrated and was almost completely obliterated. Wu Qifeng and the Old Lama also struggled out at the last moment. This was related to the amount of energy substance preserved after the soul light disintegrated. There was a period of silence as everyone lamented. There would never be a perfect thing in this world. This time, they gave Chu Feng endless hope. He thought it was perfect, but in the end, it was still incomplete and there was great regret. In addition, Qin Luoyin hadn't appeared yet. She had always been at Chu Feng's side. His corpse was still there, and presumably his true spirit was trapped inside. Brother, are we going to reincarnate? The Black Yak asked. Their feelings were complicated. There was reluctance and also gloominess. They had been easily obliterated, and they didn't even have the hope to take revenge. They had to rush to an unknown afterlife. It's no big deal. We'll fight again in the next life. Yellow Cattle was very resolute. He wasn't dejected, but had a kind of conviction. Puffed. Some blood splattered in the surroundings. Whether it was Chu Feng's parents or Yellow Cattle and Zhou Quan, they were all very uncomfortable. It made them feel dizzy and want to retch. What was around them? There was a silver-striped crocodile dragon that was crushed into pieces. Broken bones and blood splattered in all directions. There was an ant that was as big as a wild elephant disintegrated and black juices flowed out. There was a palm-sized metallic man that exploded and turned into metal powder. There was a viscous scarlet liquid around them as if they had sunk into tomato sauce, but they all knew what it was. At the same time, they were also gathering toward the center. They were about to receive the final obliteration and be sent onto the road of reincarnation. In reality, their place was very abnormal. First, there was a strange substance, and then there was the stone box's protection. Only then could they avoid being crushed. But now it was no longer possible. Apart from the living Chu Feng, the stone box no longer protected them. Moreover, a row of golden runes on the coarse and enormous stone millstone lit up and began to target everyone. They didn't know why, but they thought of the words, "Heaven's net has a long reach." Naturally, they weren't vicious and evil people. It was just that it seemed very difficult if they wanted to sneak over. Will we forget everything? From then on, we won't know where we came from, and we won't know who we are. We'll be reborn in a strange world. Chu Feng's mother, Wang Jing, pulled his hand. Her face was full of pain and sorrow. She wasn't willing to leave. She couldn't part with this place, and she couldn't put her mind at ease with Chu Feng. Mom, Chu Feng supported her. Even though his heart ached, he told her that he would think of a way to make them remember everything and not forget this life. I don't want to forget this life either. I still want to drink big bowls of wine and eat big chunks of meat together. We'll chase after the enemy together. I haven't even taken revenge for this life, so how can I be willing? Ouyang Feng shouted. We'll still be good brothers in our next lives. Chu Feng looked at them and consoled them. He solemnly told them that he would strive to let them reincarnate with their wisdom. The moment that should come had still come. Chu Feng made them gather together and guard the black talisman paper together. And at this time, Qin Luoyin had also left the range of Chu Feng's stone box and was together with Chu Feng's parents. Boom! The millstone crushed over and Qin Luoyin's soul light emerged. She and Chu Feng looked at each other. There were too many things they wanted to talk about, and her eyes were filled with tears of the soul. Chu Feng's voice was trembling. He felt sorry for Qin Luoyin. He didn't protect her well and made her abandon her child. She was reincarnated alone like this. His heart was desolate, and he didn't know what the road ahead was like. He told her everything with the most concise words and promised that he would look for her in his next life. Qin Luoyin looked back with too many regrets. She was looking at Chu Feng as if she was looking at the Yin Realm universe for the last time. Boom! Golden light erupted as the coarse millstone crushed over. It was as if it was formatting everyone and wanted to cut down everything in this world. The black talisman paper glowed and floated up and down among everyone. Pop! Everyone's soul light was lightly trembling, and a wisp of gray matter floated out from each of them. It was forced out from the soul light of Yellow Cattle and the others. Chu Feng's body was ice cold as he felt a chill. This gray matter was too troublesome to deal with. As expected, it was even tangling with the soul light. Even though he had anticipated that there might be remnants and believed that they needed to be completely reincarnated, he still felt a lingering fear after witnessing it with his own eyes. At the same time, he also thought about himself. Just how much of this strange matter was inside his body and soul light. In the end, everyone fell out of the millstone and stepped onto the reincarnation path. At this moment, they were temporarily muddled and forgot everything. Even if they had the black talisman paper, it wouldn't do. Back then, the little Taoist had only awakened when he reached the end of reincarnation. These people would also be the same. Chu Feng personally escorted them and activated the black talisman paper. He brought everyone along and hurried on at top speed to ensure that no accidents would happen to them. Along the way, he saw those ancient soldiers whose flesh and blood were almost rotten and shriveled up. They were all carrying standard reincarnation blades on their backs, and their scabbards were rotten. This time, he didn't stop and didn't want to take this kind of blade again. They finally arrived. An enormous black abyss lay across this place and cut off the path ahead. Countless creatures threw themselves forward and fell into the darkness like dumplings. No matter how powerful you were when you were alive, you still couldn't fly into the sky or burrow into the earth. You could only pounce and leap like a wild beast here. Let's go! Chu Feng brought everyone along and used the black talisman paper to cross this abyss. They arrived at the other side. There was a railing here and an ancient cave. There was also an ancient clay idol sitting cross-legged quietly as it guarded the end of the reincarnation path. When they arrived here, everyone felt as if they were in a dream as they gradually recovered. However, they still lost a portion of their memories. Fortunately, it wasn't considered serious. Chu Feng's heart sank. He knew that this should be because there were too few talisman papers. With so many people sharing them, there was definitely something lacking. Chu Feng's father shed tears of his soul during the final farewell, so there was no need to talk about his mother. She was going to be separated by life and death from her own child. They were separated by a lifetime and reincarnation. In the next life, you guys will still be my parents. Chu Feng's lips trembled, feeling great pain in his heart, unable to endure it. However, right now, there really was nothing he could do. Chu Ziyuan calmed down and said, "Don't set up all kinds of problems for yourself. I know that it's already very difficult for you to send us here. Whether it's the injuries or the hardships of this life, it's all just an experience, an experience. It's time to end it. We should leave freely and not take anything from this life with us. In this life, You're our child. Familial love is eternal. It will illuminate this life. Our experiences have been wonderful, and after this journey, everything will be fixed here. Let's be free and easy on our way. Let's not be sad. Perhaps that's even better. Let's experience something new and exciting. There's no need to be reluctant, and there's no need to feel pain. His open-minded attitude in the end made Chu Feng's heart ache even more. Wang Jing cried there with tears of her soul and said, "Child, as long as you can live well, we can let go of everything. You are our son in this life, and we are already very satisfied. Your father is right. Let go of everything now, and we should leave calmly to experience new splendor. You don't have to bear any burdens." Big Black Yak, Yellow Cattle, Ouyang Feng, Old Donkey, and the others all came over. They were reluctant to part and were filled with sadness. There was also Qin Luoyin, who looked at Chu Feng with her soul light trembling and tears flowing. In the end, she told him to take good care of the little Taoist. "Don't be like this. All of you will have your innate wisdom. I will definitely go to the Yang realm to find all of you," Chu Feng said in a low voice. After that, he made everyone light up the black talisman papers together so that they could worship the clay idol together. "Will all of us appear in the Yang realm?" Yellow Cattle asked. "We should." Chu Feng nodded. He had communicated with the little Taoist before. Normally, the little Taoist would appear in the Yang realm, but he was ambushed by Chu Feng and the talisman paper was snatched away. Those who held the talisman paper would have a very high cultivation starting point in their next life. At this moment, Chu Feng began to recite scriptures. They were all the most powerful breathing techniques. There were those from the deity race, the Buddhist race, the quasi-mortal race, and also the robbery induction breathing technique. He hoped that they would be able to preserve their memories and use these inheritances to quickly rise up in their next lives. These techniques were only up to the Illuminator realm, but these were enough. They were stunning enough when they were young. After they had their hair cut and their marrow cleansed, there would definitely be ancient and powerful orthodoxies in the Yang realm willing to accept them as disciples. However, Chu Feng also knew that there was only one talisman paper. It was simply too little and couldn't protect everyone completely. These people already had some incomplete memories after walking for such a distance. Perhaps they would lose a lot of their memories when they truly went to reincarnation. I hope all of you can remember part of the scriptures. Chu Feng could only hope like this. These people went on their way and entered the ancient cave to truly go to the afterlife. There was still a small section of the black talisman paper that hadn't burned out. Chu Feng picked it up because he still needed to cross the abyss and return to the Yang realm. Chu Feng took out the diamond chakram. Back then, he had shared the offerings with the clay idol here. Those mysterious people who had gone to the afterlife had ignited the talisman paper in worship. Glowing veined patterns appeared and twined around his diamond chakram. Now, he activated the diamond chakram and tried to ignite it with his soul flame. As expected, threads of glowing runes appeared. He took the remaining small section of the black talisman paper and wanted to use it as compensation to further increase everyone's offerings. He was afraid that they wouldn't have enough. "Goodbye," Chu Feng said as he gazed at the reincarnation cave. "If there's a next life, we'll still be brothers." The Black Yak, Yellow Cattle, and the others roared in the cave. Chapter 955. Take care, brother. We're going to reincarnate. In my next life, I'll strive to be an ox demon with ideals, morals, strength, and great fortune. This time, I'm going to the Yang realm to be reincarnated into an aristocratic family of scholars. At that time, not only will I be a beautiful woman, but I'll also be able to suppress the gods with words. Before everyone left, they shouted in the reincarnation cave. Chu Feng understood that they were purposely trying to dilute the sadness of parting. The group of demons whistled into the distance. His parents also called out to him, telling him to live well, not to make things difficult for himself, and not to bear too much. Qin Luoyin was also looking back into the distance, and yellow cattle was also nodding. The cries of those people came from the depths of the reincarnation cave, but they were very far away. They seemed to have discovered something. There was surprise and nervousness in that place because it was full of the unknown. Chu Feng couldn't hear or see them, and he was disappointed and frustrated for a long time. He raised his head and looked at the motionless clay idol sitting on the high platform. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, and it was impossible to tell whether it was male or female. It was wearing an ancient beast skin robe under the thick layer of dust, but its silhouette and style couldn't be seen. Back then, Chu Feng had used the fiery eyes to see through it. It was very dangerous. Back then, the stone box had emitted light as if it had blocked something. At that time, Chu Feng suspected that he would have died here without the stone box. This time, he didn't act rashly. However, his gaze wandered to the bracelet on the clay idol's wrist. It was formed from ancient beast teeth and bone pieces strung together. Its style was very old, and it seemed to bear all the marks of the river of time. In the past, Chu Feng had thought that it was made from the hardest bones and teeth of various beings at the Illuminator level. Now, it seemed that he had underestimated it. The main reason was that the strongest he knew at that time was only at the Illuminator level. He didn't know that there were gods and celestial venerables above them. Now, it seemed that the clay idol was unfathomable, and there was no way to measure its level. Chu Feng turned around and didn't stay for long. Right now, he was a bit suspicious as well. This was a clay statue, not necessarily a living creature, who would sit here for hundreds of millions of years, enduring endless loneliness and solitude. It was simply unendurable. Even if it was an ant, it was impossible for the dragon to not react when it appeared next to a giant dragon and made a move. Perhaps it was really just a statue? Chu Feng disappeared. Holding the last corner of the black talisman, he crossed the abyss and moved against the reincarnation path, quickly disappearing into the distance. By now, the more he understood and explored this place, the more terrifying it was. When he was on the other side, the old fox who was about to be completely petrified had said that this place couldn't be spoken of, couldn't be investigated. The heavenly deities and others all treated the reincarnation path like a taboo, not willing to talk about it. The waters within were terrifyingly deep, possibly a terrifying situation. The petrified fox considered itself a celestial venerable. Even its master might not be qualified to join the game. It was full of uncertainty. Chu Feng used the last corner of the talisman to fly along the reincarnation path, spending more than a day's time to quickly hurry back. Before he broke free from the stone millstone, a row of golden symbols scattered down, almost locking him in place. Chu Feng vaguely heard a miserable scream from the depths of his body, including his soul light. His flesh and soul felt a terrifying pressure, almost being scattered. He was almost crushed into mincemeat by the rough stone millstone. He immediately guessed that this was caused by a strange substance within his body. The stone millstone was aimed at this type of thing, wanting to completely obliterate it. But now, the gray mist and Chu Feng had condensed into one, from the soul to the flesh. Unless he personally experienced reincarnation and destroyed his body in this world, he couldn't get rid of it. The stone box shone, blocking the row of golden symbols. After a brief confrontation with the rough stone millstone, Chu Feng smoothly broke free. He returned to the city of death and rushed out again. Chu Feng's expression was solemn, and a haze appeared in his heart. This strange substance was truly terrifying. It occupied his body and was definitely a great disaster. He knew that the reason he wasn't dead and wasn't destroyed by the rough millstone was all because of the stone box's protection. It's a bit different. The landscape of mountains and rivers can be vaguely discerned within the vein patterns on one of the sides. Chu Feng activated it. One of the 6 sides of the stone box was slightly sparkling and translucent. It contained all kinds of topographies that were supreme secret lands to domain researchers. If word of this got out, it would shock the world. For example, the true revered 8 trigrams furnace topographies. This wasn't an area set up artificially on Mount Jijin, but was nurtured by the heaven and earth. It was naturally formed and emitted an aura. The more one looked at it, the more one would sink into it. Unwittingly, Chu Feng discovered that he was actually drenched in cold sweat. This revered 8 trigrams furnace topographies, apart from the proper immortal furnace and 8 trigrams fire, actually had a palm leaf fan in charge of fanning the flames. There was also a calabash floating beside it. Of course, they were all mountains, but the domain chi they derived actually formed such a phenomenon after being condensed. The earth veins were terrifying and simply too extraordinary. Apart from these, there was also the 100 Phoenix sky incinerating diagram. The mountains and rivers were grand, and the geomagnetic chi surged. They transformed into a flock of immortal birds that burned the 33 heavens. Then, they danced together and paid their respects to one side. The place they were paying their respects to was covered in a hazy mist and couldn't be seen clearly. What kind of scene was this? This greatly shook Chu Feng. There were dozens of mountain topographies. Any one of them could be considered an ultimate diagram for domain researchers. It was of great significance. If I can construct the power of this topographies, won't it be too easy to suppress and kill experts? Of course, he also knew that even if he could decipher and understand the mysteries, the amount of heavenly materials and earthly treasures required would be tremendous. It might even require all kinds of rare and precious treasures. Otherwise, how could he suppress the world? At the same time, Chu Feng's heart was burning with passion. These naturally formed topographies definitely contained unimaginable fortunes. If he could enter and use the mountains and rivers to nourish his body and cultivate with the treasures within, he would naturally be able to evolve rapidly in the shortest time possible. Where are these topographies located? Were they located in the Yang realm? Chu Feng was lost in thought and looked more and more carefully. There were golden specks of light flickering between these mountains and rivers. With his fiery eyes, he could see that they were runes after runes. He had seen them before, but now they were even clearer. He guessed that this might be the most precious thing. Even the row of words on the rough stone millstone in the radiant city of death were contained within the runes within the stone box. Chu Feng studied it for a long time and was somewhat suspicious in the end. Every time I go through the reincarnation path, this stone box seems to have awakened a little. Is it because it was crushed by the millstone and activated by the pressure? Or is there some other reason? At the same time, he also thought of the robbery induction breathing technique. After leaving purgatory, he needed to circulate this breathing technique in order to make one side of the stone box glow. Other methods were ineffective. Could it be that the robbery induction was also related to the stone box? Chu Feng activated it once again and then carefully observed the dozens of golden specks of light. He began to comprehend it seriously and solemnly. It was just that it was too difficult and abstruse. Moreover, his eyes were aching and the fiery eyes couldn't bear it. It was as though they were being burned and were about to be destroyed. Chu Feng had returned and sat on Mount Kunlun for a day and a night to commemorate everything of the past. From now on, he was about to embark on a journey without looking back. What do you want to do? The demonic cauldron asked. Become a god first, then go hunt gods. Chu Feng replied. The demonic ancestral cauldron was speechless and felt that this goal was impossible to achieve. This universe had an upper limit. A day later, Chu Feng left and secretly walked around the universe in search of something. But in the end, he returned to Mount Kunlun with a frown. He sat there cross-legged and pondered quietly. Apparently, he was making an important decision. In the early morning, he swallowed the morning glow to improve his constitution and slowly evolve. He had 3 seeds and the stone box in hand, but the highest upper limit of this universe was the Illuminator realm. He had gone to many places to look at the terrain in search of mutant soil. The top-notch mutant soil was the dazzling and colorful mutant soil. It should be able to help him reach the peak of the Saint realm. There was mutant soil of a higher level, but it was very difficult to find. Besides, he was already at the Saint realm now. If he wanted to become a Illuminator expert, Not only did he need the seed in his hand to germinate and blossom, but he also needed to ponder and comprehend the order of heaven and earth. After reaching this level, if he wanted to increase his strength, he couldn't guarantee that he could evolve all the way even with the mutant fruit. He also needed to comprehend and transform his soul light. If he wanted to nurture his body and become an illuminator expert with the mountains and rivers, it was also very difficult to realize. The Een Realm universe lacked that kind of fortune vein. It's time to go on my way. I'll go crazy for once. Chu Feng stood up in the morning glow and made up his mind. There was only one path he could take if he wanted to become a god. The demonic ancestral cauldron was startled. It felt that the flickering brilliance in Chu Feng's eyes was a little terrifying and crazy. It felt that things weren't looking good. What do you want to do? I'm going to fulfill a promise. I'm going to the foreign realm. Chu Feng answered. He had a promise to the vermilion bird race. He was going to guide the little red bird over and bring it out of that terrifying land. But he hadn't fulfilled it yet. It wasn't that he didn't want to go to the foreign realm to guide it, but the demonic ancestral cauldron didn't have the strength to open up a path after returning from there. By the time it swallowed the essence of the mountains and rivers of the deity planet and the Shilling planet, the people from the Yang realm would attack again. How could Chu Feng go under such circumstances? If he really brought the little vermilion bird over, it would be tantamount to letting it suffer a death calamity. Now that the situation had stabilized slightly, he had also made up his mind to go there and conspire. He wanted to go crazy for once, so he couldn't delay any longer. After calculating the time, a few months had passed. A year in this world was 100 years in the foreign realm. The little vermilion bird had already grown dozens of years older. You want to go there to become a god? Are you crazy? The demonic ancestral cauldron cried out in alarm. This was definitely the most terrifying choice. What kind of place was that? Now the demonic ancestral cauldron knew for sure. It had seen the terror of the strange substance in purgatory. Only that coarse millstone could completely grind it away. Otherwise, once it came into contact with it, it would be haunted for a lifetime until death. It guessed that Chu Feng most likely didn't want to take advantage of the time difference to cultivate. Instead, he wanted to use the craziest method to evolve. He desired to become strong too much. He wanted to become a god in the shortest time possible. There's still time. The path opened in the Yang realm can be stable for more than a year. Those enemies wait for my return. Chu Feng's voice was very cold, and a cold glint flickered in the depths of his eyes. Last time was too humiliating. Everyone around him had died, and now he was the only one left in this world. Even his parents had died tragically, and all his relatives and friends had perished. How could he be willing? Even if there were individuals who didn't have an ending, it was still unknown whether they were alive or dead. Young lady, she had been captured, and Yao Yao had fallen into the abyss. As for what would happen, no one knew. Moreover, even if his parents, Qin Luoyin, and the others were reincarnated, it was still full of variables. After all, could a single black talisman protect them and smoothly reincarnate? This farewell might be an eternal one. Perhaps they wouldn't see each other in the next life and wouldn't be able to meet again. Even if they were fated and were still alive, it was also possible that they wouldn't know each other from then on. They wouldn't know who they were in their previous lives and could only live a new life today. Thinking of this, Chu Feng's heart ached. He couldn't bear it and wanted to personally take revenge. Even if he couldn't kill the Celestial Venerable, he would first slaughter some of his disciples to hunt them down and kill them. If he wanted to achieve this, then he could only take the risk and dream 100 years in a foreign land. This was something he had thought about for a long time and felt that it was feasible. This time, the reason why he was a little hesitant was because at the radiant city of death, Chu Feng had further seen how terrifying the gray mist was. Once entangled, there was simply no way out. He was somewhat apprehensive, but in the end, he still had to go on his way. You have to think twice. The demon ancestral cauldron warned solemnly. It's no big deal. I've left a way out for myself. I won't throw my life away. Chu Feng was very firm. He wouldn't change his mind. He let out a low roar and said, This time, I'm going to kill until those people from the Yang realm who have crossed over are terrified. I'm going to kill until those living in the Yang realm feel their hearts bleed after receiving the news. You have to understand what you're doing. The demon ancestral cauldron warned again. I'm clear, I understand. Chu Feng nodded and then said, let's go. Send me on my way. Moreover, this time my physical body will also follow. Chapter 956. Go over with his physical body. The demonic cauldron was dumbfounded. How was this possible? This request was too difficult for it. Back then, when it sent the black yak, yellow cattle, and the others over, it was very strenuous to protect their soul light. The demonic cauldron warned him not to play with fire, or else his physical body would be destroyed. It wasn't that it hadn't experimented in the past, and there were heaven-bestowed geniuses whose physical bodies were reduced to ashes. But Chu Feng took the risk and felt that it wasn't a big problem. Last time, he had tried it with the soul bell and brought back a few drops of divine liquid. He also brought back the azure calabash, which meant that he could carry things. Moreover, his trump card this time wasn't the soul bell but the stone box. He firmly believed that this ultimate artifact that even the Yang realm celestial venerables yearned for could save his life. The demonic cauldron admitted that the stone box was mysterious. It could even charge through reincarnation and wasn't afraid of being ground by a rough stone millstone. It was the most heaven-defying object it had ever seen in its life. As such, it didn't oppose it anymore. Next, the demon ancestral cauldron began to prepare very seriously. This matter couldn't be sloppy. It clearly told Chu Feng that it couldn't open a path with its true strength because the spatial node it had mentioned before was on Earth. It was the thinnest place between the two realms and a spatial crack. Even so, it was very difficult to pass through it. Before long, Chu Feng and the demonic cauldron arrived at Mount Eternal. Although the node changed with time, it was still here in the present. See you in a year. At Mount Eternal, Chu Feng took one last look at the ocean behind him. He was going to leave and cultivate madly for 100 years. Then he would hunt gods. On Mount Eternal, 7 great mountains stood side by side and shone at the same time. A slightly damaged and incomparably mysterious boundary membrane began to appear in the middle of them. In this life, the demon ancestral cauldron's land of inheritance, Mount Eternal, had landed on Earth. It wasn't unrelated to this node. Chu Feng entered the space inside the stone box and brought along the soul bell, as well as some simple artifacts. Everything else was placed on Mount Eternal. Buzz! Divine multicolored light blossomed, and auspicious light overflowed the heavens. At the spatial node, the weakest boundary membrane was broken. With a so sound, the stone box rushed over. This node was originally unstable, but now it was pierced through. The boundary membrane was damaged. The demonic cauldron was stupefied. This time, it didn't seem to be too strenuous. Comparatively speaking, it was relatively easier. It immediately knew that this was the work of the stone box. This was indeed a heaven-defying artifact. However, why didn't it give birth to an artifact spirit? Why couldn't it speak? I will stand guard here. If you want to come back, you can communicate with me at the place where you landed. The demonic cauldron warned him that if he wanted to come back, he had to be guided by the people here. Otherwise, even if Chu Feng became extremely powerful, he would not be able to come back. This involved some irreversible order. It was a very complicated rule of the world. On the other side, Chu Feng sensed an extremely terrifying order at the very beginning. It was crushing over. Even though he was inside the stone box, he was shaking violently. The inner walls of the stone box were emitting a faint glow. In the end, he calmed down. There was nothing wrong with him, no injuries. Chu Feng immediately knew that this was the heaven-defying aspect of the stone box. Without it, his physical body would have definitely been reduced to ashes like that genius of the past. The lid of the box opened, and Chu Feng leaped up. Standing on the crimson ground, he sensed a dense spiritual energy, but as far as the eye could see, it was somewhat desolate. He had returned and descended upon the foreign land once more. See you again in 100 years. Chu Feng waved his hand at the spatial node behind him. Whoosh! Chu Feng immediately disappeared at the end of the horizon. He had come to this world before, so he was no stranger to it. He had even visited this region in the past. He wanted to pass through the periphery of Vicious Beast Plateau and go to the vicinity of that abyss. There were two great spheres of influence in this world. One of them was where the gods living in the depths of Vicious Beast Plateau were located. The other sphere of influence was the abyss. Divine beasts dwelled there, and they were all under the terrifying Great Black Rift Valley. The Vermilion bird race lived in the Vermilion bird abyss. The number of people in this race was sparse, and their inheritance had once been severed. Naturally, the two great spheres of influence weren't peaceful internally either. There were frequent civil wars. For example, the old Vermilion bird in the Vermilion bird abyss had once annihilated the Soaring Serpent Abyss before Chu Feng left. Of course, the Soaring Serpent Abyss only had itself to blame for its destruction. It had mistakenly thought that the old Vermilion bird was declining and about to die, so it took the initiative to invade. In the end, it was annihilated instead. Meanwhile, on Vicious Beast Plateau, the martial god, the moon goddess, the witch god, and so on weren't on good terms with each other. Divine wars would occasionally break out, and the later years of the gods were very miserable. A few months had passed in the Een Realm universe, but decades had passed in this world. Chu Feng calculated that over 30 years should have passed. There was definitely no problem with the little Vermilion bird. He still had sufficient lifespan, but he didn't know how the old Vermilion bird was doing. When he left back then, the limit of his lifespan was to hold on for another 50 years. The affairs of the world changed very quickly. No one could say for sure what would happen and how long he could live for in the end. Other than that lame yellow-furred fox considered itself a heavenly venerable. He didn't know how it was doing now. Was it completely petrified? Chu Feng was very worried. He really wanted to see that fox again because he had a lot of things he wanted to ask it. Halt! When he passed through the periphery of Vicious Beast Plateau, this region was exceptionally desolate. However, he just so happened to encounter a few evolvers, and the one leading them was actually a quasi-saint. This man in silver armor was in charge of patrolling this area with a troop of cavalrymen. They were said to be cavalrymen, but they were all from the flying race. For example, the Inferno salamander was entirely scarlet. It was an extremely powerful species that was very suitable as a mount. Other than that, there was also the blue lion. Its entire body was azure blue, and its wings were also blue. Its roar was like muffled thunder, and its blood chi surged. It was a very powerful mount. Chu Feng was astonished. What had happened? The quasi-saint was leading the troop. Even though there weren't many people following behind him, they were all knights at the Golden Body Perfection realm. He didn't pay them any attention and continued to advance. Shoot him to death. With a wave of the quasi-saint's hand, a divine archer immediately drew his giant bow. Rays of light erupted, and he revealed a cruel and callous smile as he shot an arrow at Chu Feng. Unfortunately, they encountered an enemy they couldn't afford to provoke. Chu Feng waved his hand, and his palm blade was like a rainbow. Divine light overflowed into the sky, and the aura of a saint erupted, shattering the arrows and suppressing everyone. Very soon, he knew what had happened. The gods of Vicious Beast Plateau had been waging war with the divine beasts of the abyss in recent years. The situation was grim, so there were quasi-saints among the patrolling troops. The high-end combat power of this world was very terrifying. Even though it was no longer as prosperous as it was in the past, there were still gods overseeing it. Chu Feng went far away at top speed and charged toward Vicious Beast Plateau. He was itching to rush to the Vermilion bird abyss immediately. At the same time, his cultivation had officially begun after he arrived in this realm. He didn't hold back in the slightest when he encountered people who wanted to intercept and kill him along the way. He immediately used the little 6 rays of time technique. He didn't dare to cultivate this kind of forbidden divine technique back then because he wasn't willing to sink too deeply into it. But this time, he wanted to cultivate it to the highest level and throw caution to the wind. He was going to go crazy. This was going to be the sharpest demon sword in his hands. It could hurt others and also hurt himself. This feeling can wait to become a memory. On the way, Chu Feng got rid of 2 or 3 saints mercilessly. It was fine if they wanted to stop him from investigating, but they still wanted to kill him, so they had to be prepared to be killed. At the same time, he was somewhat disappointed and couldn't help but feel sad. When he obtained the little 6 rays of time technique back then, he had once changed its name and jokingly said, "This feeling can wait to become a memory." How could he have foreseen that his words would become a prophecy? Looking back, too many of his relatives and friends had died. There weren't many people left who had come to this world with him. His Tao companion, Qin Luin, had also passed away, leaving the world in dejection. What an ominous world. Just what kind of secrets are you hiding? This time, I will rise up here. Gods, just wait. Tremble. Chu Feng let out a low roar and quickly went into the distance. Along the way, he encountered evolvers who wanted to kill him. He didn't show any mercy and directly used the little 6 rays of time technique to deal a fatal blow. He had just returned to this world and didn't want anyone to know. Only 30-odd years had passed, and his enemies from back then hadn't even died of old age. He had already formed a mortal enmity with the martial god's lineage. Before he left, he had killed the martial god and the others. In addition, the witch god and the moon goddess troops had also chased after him, and he had also killed their outstanding descendants. Now, he had returned and might encounter a god one day, but he was fearless. If there were enemies, then so be it. He would step on blood and bones to face all challenges and sweep away all enemies in 100 years of slaughter and conquest. If he couldn't even get rid of the martial god and the others, then how could he kill the gods from the Yang realm? Chu Feng began his path of iron and blood. He wouldn't kill the innocent indiscriminately. If there was a favor, he would still repay it generously. However, he absolutely had to make his enemies' expressions change when they heard his name. I'll start cultivating in seclusion and grow in solitude. He wouldn't expose his identity in the initial stage. Otherwise, he would most likely be strangled to death. His identity was very sensitive. Once it was exposed, the entire Vicious Beast Plateau would hunt him down. Finally, Chu Feng arrived in the vicinity of the abyss. He had spent over a month and killed his way here. He had passed through some large-scale battlefields and concealed his true appearance. As expected, the camps of the 2 great powers were colliding and fighting each other. The flames of war raged in the foreign realm. In the short span of a month, Chu Feng's strength had increased by a chunk. He used the little 6 rays of time technique to kill his enemies and absorbed a large amount of divinity granules, as well as extremely rare and precious ancestral Taoist matter. He was very strenuous like a crazed demon. He was incomparably eager to become stronger in the shortest time possible. To him, this kind of journey was cultivation. Little vermilion bird, petrified celestial venerable fox, I hope you're all safe and sound. I have a way to take you away. Chu Feng stood on the desolate plains, gazing at the abyss in front of him. He had already obtained some information on the way here. His heart was rather restless as he faced the vermilion bird's abyss. The situation in the dilapidated primal chaos universe had been unstable recently. The Tao body of the great martial heavenly lord had fallen, and Princess Mingchuan had even seized this opportunity to successfully break through and charge into the Yang realm. There was no need to think too much. The Yang realm was definitely not peaceful. The death of one of the great martial heavenly lord's Tao bodies was a huge matter. If nothing unexpected happened, the great martial heavenly lords might descend and dispatch another Tao body. But in the end, the great martial heavenly lord didn't appear. It was reported that the reason why he dispatched his Tao body last time to search for the Yang realm's precious treasure in the past was related to the terrifying external environment he was facing now. An old enemy had appeared and was confronting him. And now that he was injured, he didn't dare to act blindly without thinking and didn't descend his Tao body again. The other celestial venerables were also very cautious. They didn't have the intention to personally enter the Yang realm because, to them, that mass grave was an ominous place. The celestial venerables who went there back then didn't have a good ending. The more experienced the celestial venerables were, the more afraid they were. This time, they dispatched some talented disciples to act on their behalf. In fact, some of their bloodline descendants would go there. The great martial heavenly lord was no exception. Some of his descendants came through the boundary membrane of the Yang realm and entered the primal chaos universe. Now, they had already confirmed that there was an ultimate ancient artifact in the Yang realm. It should be one of the precious treasures of the Yang realm back then. Their hearts were burning with incomparable fervor. Now, there was a rumor that the endless mysterious wall that had appeared in the Yang realm back then might only be one side of an ancient artifact. It was just one side, but it had created two existences who had fallen on the path of ultimate evolution. It was truly unfathomable. The powerhouses were in awe and didn't dare to come personally. They were afraid that they would die in the Yang realm like those celestial venerables in the past, or that something ominous would happen later, or they would perish on the way back. However, the later generations were fearless, and the ignorant were fearless. Some of the bloodlines left behind by the powerhouses and some of the rising stars couldn't sit still and appeared in the primal chaos universe. Chapter 9:57. The vermilion bird abyss was pitch black and serene, like a black hole that cut off the entire land. There was a lack of vitality nearby. Even if there were plants, they had all dried up. There were cracks on the ground that extended far into the distance. Chu Feng frowned deeply. He immediately felt that something was wrong. The energy radiation in this area was too abnormal. It was a little too high. In the abyss, it was as if a tide was surging. The energy radiation was extremely fierce, causing all life in this area to be extinguished. It was about to become a land of death. He was bewildered. This was similar to the signs of a god on the verge of passing away, as recorded in the books. His heart sank. Was it the old vermilion bird? Before he came here, he had heard a few rumors that the old vermilion bird was very crazy a year ago. He charged into the vicious beast plateau all the way and slaughtered God. It was said that the god had once said that once the vermilion bird tribe declined, he would come and destroy them. As a result, in his later years, when the old vermilion bird didn't have much time left in his life, he first went to fight his way into another great camp, directly slaughtering a deity. This type of battle accomplishment was too terrifying. Afterwards, the old vermilion bird didn't appear again. Everyone believed that it was about to die and pass away in meditation within the abyss. However, no one dared to provoke it or take advantage of it in its final years. Everyone knew that the old vermilion bird was too powerful. It had cultivated for a long time, and it wasn't like other life forms that absorbed divinity granules and ancestral Tao matter. Instead, it had evolved step by step and was born. As a result, its later years wouldn't be very miserable. If it really wanted to risk its life, it could still fight. Many people were waiting for an opportunity. Once it died, they would definitely come knocking on its door, cut the weeds, and eliminate its descendants. Is he really going to die in meditation? Chu Feng sighed. When he received the news on the road, it had been like this since a year ago. It was exactly because of this that the vermilion bird abyss had temporarily avoided the flames of war. No one wanted to provoke a terrifying vermilion bird that didn't have long to live. Chu Feng called out softly, transmitting sound into the great abyss, informing him that he had returned. However, there was no response. His heart trembled as he sank into the earth in an instant. He was using his domain techniques to shrink the earth to an inch and move hundreds of thousands of kilometers away to hide in an unknown location. No one chased after him, which made Chu Feng suspicious. In the end, he returned to the vermilion bird abyss and used the geomagnetic field to detect any movement within the vermilion bird abyss. A quarter of an hour later, Chu Feng appeared at the bottom of the 800-mile-deep Black Rift Valley, his face gloomy. There was a divine corpse here, but it definitely wasn't the old vermilion birds. It had been arranged by someone, and the energy radiation was astonishing. This involved extremely profound methods. Had it not been for Chu Feng's extraordinary attainments in the domain of domains, he would have found it difficult to believe that there were other divine remains here. At the same time, he discovered important carvings here, and they were words that belonged to the Yin realm universe. They were left especially for him to provide clues. It was not a direct message, but a code word. It simply mentioned the handbook of the path to the strongest. It was marked with the 81st word of the first chapter, the 13th word of the fourth chapter, the 9th and 39th word of the fifth chapter. Chu Feng was dumbfounded. This was the work of the lame, celestial, venerable fox. Back then, it had passed on to Chu Feng a handbook of the so-called path to the strongest. It was the crystallization of the old fox's master's painstaking efforts and was known to be an extremely mature training method. At that time, Chu Feng regretted that he wasn't from a specialized class. He had always been an unorthodox person and hadn't been able to cultivate many areas to the flawless level. Thus, the lame celestial venerable fox passed on this handbook and told him to give it a try if he had the chance. This was an extremely mature path in the Yang realm and was a work of painstaking effort. Chu Feng deciphered the message and found that it was a secret location with specific coordinates. He disappeared and left this place. This time, Chu Feng didn't cross the battlefield or kill enemies. Instead, he moved stealthily and traveled with the help of the geomagnetic veins. It took him a full 2 days to arrive at the location, a hilly area. However, he still didn't find anything this time. There was no one here, and it was just a message. After deciphering it, it was still a coordinate address. Chu Feng had no choice but to set out again. He could see that the lame celestial venerable fox and the vermilion bird family were very cautious, which also meant that their situation was very bad. If they were strong enough, why would they need to be so careful? After 5 consecutive attempts, Chu Feng continued to search on the road after deciphering the location. The last place was in a desolate stone forest that stretched as far as the eye could see. After Chu Feng found his destination, he sensed that there were evolvers lying in wait. Chirp! With a light chirp, a scarlet bolt of lightning flew over, bringing with it a torrential fiery light as it pounced toward Chu Feng with extreme speed. He instantly shifted horizontally and stood on a giant rock dozens of kilometers away. The place where he had originally stood had become a magma lake. Following that, a cave appeared on the ground, and all the magma flowed into it, forming a whirlpool. A small fiery red bird with sparkling scarlet wings was tilting its head to look at him. Chu Feng! It cried out involuntarily. The voice was clear and melodious. It was the voice of a young girl. The little vermilion bird. It was definitely it. Chu Feng recognized it at a glance. He hadn't expected that the last part of the journey would be so smooth. He had found the right place and discovered this race. Swoosh! Chu Feng rushed over and arrived in front of it. He carefully examined it and touched a cluster of scarlet feathers on its head. As a result, the little vermilion bird's eyes widened, and it pecked at it with its sharp, scarlet, jade-like beak. "It hurts," shouted Chu Feng, somewhat speechless. This little bird was very aggressive and didn't even allow him to touch it. Fortunately, he was at the saint level, or else a bloody hole would have appeared in his hand. The little vermilion bird looked at him vigilantly and warned him not to act rashly. Chu Feng was dumbfounded. He finally knew what he had done wrong. The voice it let out was that of a young girl. Without a doubt, this was a proud and dainty girl with a tinge of anger. "Where are Senior Vermilion and Senior Fox?" asked Chu Feng. That was because there weren't any other life fluctuations after arriving here. There was only the little vermilion bird's own, and he couldn't see its siblings. The little vermilion bird was sad when it heard these words. Its eyes were filled with tears as it told Chu Feng that they were already separated by life and death now. They would never see each other again. Chu Feng was gobsmacked when he heard this. He hurriedly consoled it and asked for the details. The old vermilion bird was a heaven-warping divine warrior. He was an absolute figure among the divine-level powerhouses of this generation in the foreign realm. He had even slaughtered his way into the vicious beast plateau a year ago to slaughter a god. Meanwhile, the so-called energy radiation in the abyss was obviously fake. It ought to be alive. My mother died a year ago. The little vermilion bird wept. Its entire body was sparkling and translucent like a red agate. Now, its large eyes were filled with tears as it cried sorrowfully. The well-known figures among the foreign deities were close to the divine king domain, but they still couldn't endure it in the end and had already died. The little vermilion bird said as it wept. Its tears rolled down in pairs like pearls. Its mother couldn't hold on for long after she returned after slaughtering a god a year ago. Her lifespan was about to reach its end. However, the old vermilion bird was unyielding and didn't want to wait for death. He directly slaughtered his way into the foreign realm's #1 forbidden land. He wanted to try his final heaven-defying move and fight for a future. Unfortunately, he failed. Not long after he charged into that forbidden land, his soul light was extinguished and he died there forever. Are you sure that Senior has passed away? Perhaps there are other opportunities and she's just temporarily trapped, comforted Chufeng. The little vermilion bird wept and shook its head. At that time, it and the old fox had personally sent her off. It saw its mother fall in the forbidden land forever from afar and never get up again. She was indeed dead. Chufeng sighed when he heard this. He felt very upset and regretful. Back then, the old vermilion bird treated him very well and made great efforts to send him back to the Een Realm universe. He didn't expect that their parting back then would be forever. What it said about persevering for another 50 years couldn't be realized. What about Senior Fox? After a long period of silence, Chufeng opened his mouth again. He didn't see it here, and an ominous feeling emerged in his heart. The old fox couldn't have been completely petrified and died, right? It's here. The little vermilion bird led the way and walked into the depths of the stone forest. In the end, they stopped in front of Stone Mountain. There was a small cave abode here that was overflowing with light. When Chufeng saw the lame old fox, he was stunned. Sure enough, things were still the same, but the people had changed. It had only been a few months in the Een Realm universe, but 30 years had passed here. In front of him, the stone statue of a lame fox was enshrined on a jade table. It had a lonely expression as it raised its head and looked into the distance, as if it wanted to see through the void and stare at the world of the living. It had been completely petrified. There wasn't a bit of flesh and blood left, and it had become a stone statue. Senior, Chufeng felt even more regret in his heart. He wanted to ask for guidance again. This fox's origin was extremely mysterious and extraordinary. If it wasn't fake, then it was a celestial venerable. At this moment, he realized that most things in life didn't go according to plan. There would always be regrets in reality, and things didn't match up with his expectations. He thought he could reminisce with an old friend from the foreign realm again. Poor Senior, your later years are so bleak. You've been lonely for half your life and ended up like this. Chufeng sighed. He was paying his respects here. Then, he said, Senior, don't worry. After I enter the world of the living, I will definitely go to the Fox clan and take good care of your so-called genius descendant and granddaughter. You still haven't given up. I'll beat you to death. Who knew that the stone fox would actually open its mouth and let out a sound, startling Chufeng? He quickly took a few steps back and was dumbstruck. Last time, when the old fox's descendant was mentioned, Chufeng's eyes lit up. He said that the Fox clan had many beauties and that he wanted to take a look and help the old fox take care of his descendant. In the end, he was sprayed with saliva. Senior, did you come back to life? No, you've returned to the world of the living. You have to thank me. It was my words that stimulated you to come back to life. Chufeng dawdled. In reality, he knew that the old fox definitely didn't die. It was just that his current condition was terrible. His physical body had been petrified, but his soul light still hadn't scattered. The lame old fox glared at him. In the end, he didn't get angry and sighed. Look at the depression between your brows. If you didn't lose your parents, then all your relatives died. Life is full of sorrow. How bitter is it? These words instantly made Chu Feng's face full of sorrow and dejection. The little vermilion bird couldn't help but sigh. Old Ginger was spicier. The stone fox didn't bicker with Chu Feng and didn't berate him. Just these few words made him listless. After Chu Feng's heart was hurt, he quickly pondered over the situation. This old fellow really didn't want to suffer losses. He stirred up his depressed mood as soon as he opened his mouth. He was incomparably shrewd and ruthless. "Senior, I missed you all very much. After parting for so many years, I couldn't wait to come back immediately to listen to your teachings. However, I was tied down by many things in the world and couldn't come back in time." "Tell me, what happened?" the limestone fox asked. He had already confessed that his condition wasn't good. His master had dealt him a heavy blow, causing him to fall from his original realm. After being trapped in this world, his condition worsened day by day. There would be a day when his soul would also stiffen and he would completely petrify here. Chu Feng sighed. That almighty being in the Yang realm was too ruthless. He could even punish his own disciple like this without mercy. His eyes dimmed as he briefly explained the matters in the underworld universe. One of Tai Wu's Tao bodies died. It's really unexpected. The stone fox was moved. He then told Chu Feng that his current condition was terrible. The time he could communicate with him was limited, so he had to get to the main point. "I want to become stronger. I want to become a god. I want to rise in this world as soon as possible," Chu Feng said. He then asked where the other siblings of the little vermilion bird had gone. The old fox said, "I exhausted all my means and finally sent them into the Yang realm. Unfortunately, I couldn't guarantee that they would all survive." Chu Feng immediately became spirited and said, "Senior, please send me into the Yang realm. I'll sneak over and kill them all. Do you think I still have the strength to fight in this state?" The old fox stared at him and said, "You actually came with your corporeal body?" In reality, the little vermilion bird had been sizing up Chu Feng all along. His corporeal body had descended into the foreign realm. This was quite shocking. Chu Feng didn't dare to mention the stone box. After all, the old fox was called the Celestial Venerable. He was really afraid that something bad would happen. After experiencing the matter with Tai Wu, he could see that the Celestial Venerable's desire for this kind of ultimate item was too strong. He took out the soul bell and said, "I only dared to set off because I had its protection. Last time you guys saw that I also used it to protect the little vermilion bird and almost succeeded in entering the Yang realm." Even though the old fox's eyes were made of stone, they seemed to be very deep. He stared at him a few times and said, "At least you still have a conscience and know to come back to guide the little vermilion bird." After that, he opened his mouth again and said, "However, since you've cultivated the incomplete version of the 6 rays of time technique and have already decided to crazily evolve in this world, then you should be prepared to be strangled by the strange matter in your later years. It will be very tragic and very miserable. You really are ignorant and fearless. Senior, please help me resolve it." Chu Feng had a grave expression as he consulted him. The Celestial Venerable can naturally save those whose problems aren't very serious when you're at your peak. However, you'll cultivate for 100 years and use this to become a god. You're destined to be unsolvable. The lame Celestial Venerable Fox shook his head. Chu Feng didn't say anything as he frowned deeply. "There's only one way. Go and get the talisman paper," the old fox said. "What talisman paper?" Chu Feng was stunned. The lame Celestial Venerable Fox said, "Didn't you come into contact with it on the reincarnation road? This time, I'll point you to a place. Take 2 and give 1 to the little vermilion bird." "This kind of talisman paper?" Chu Feng was shocked. Putting aside whether he had to walk this path or not, just this kind of thing was enough to make him shudder with fear and trepidation because it was too rare. Even the Yang realm, it was priceless. It could only be occasionally taken out during special times when one entered the most terrifying forbidden lands in the Yang realm. As for the little Taoists who claimed to have the aptitude of a celestial venerable in their world, the great sects of the world joined hands and were annihilated in the end. Only a few people were left, and they took out a black talisman paper from the number 1 forbidden land in their world, and it fell into the little Taoist's hand. Now, The lame celestial venerable opened his mouth and wanted to point him to take two. Chapter 958. Chu Feng couldn't help but be moved. The more he understood, the more he felt that this kind of talisman paper was extremely terrifying. One needed to enter the Forbidden Land to obtain it as a type of keepsake that could allow one to smoothly walk the path of reincarnation. Did he have a chance to get to now? His instincts told him that it was unlikely. At the same time, he felt a bit of regret, sighing inwardly. He previously had an extremely good opportunity to capture all of them in one fell swoop. There were 10 of them, but he missed it. At that time, he had never imagined that he would one day need this kind of talisman so much. In the past, he had sat in front of the reincarnation ancient cave and guarded it. If he could beat up every single one of them, be it a fairy, the beloved daughter of an almighty, or the son of a celestial venerable, it would be better to rob them all. That kind of opportunity would not come again. Talisman paper would only appear in the Forbidden Lands during special times. "Senior, where do you want me to go?" Chu Feng asked. He had a feeling that this wasn't very reliable. All the supreme pure lands in the Yang realm were fighting for the talisman paper. With the current state of the lame, celestial venerable, could he guide him to intercept it? "It's in this world. Otherwise, where do you plan on going?" The stone fox spoke, pointing out the right path. Chu Feng was startled. Then, a look of doubt appeared on his face as he earnestly asked for guidance. The lame fox told him that he had to search the foreign realm's number 1 Forbidden Land. There were definitely talisman papers there. After accumulating for so many years, no one from the foreign realm had successfully obtained them in at least 1,000,000 years. At the same time, it sternly reminded him that these so-called 1,000,000 years weren't recorded according to the time of this world, but according to the Yang realm's calendar. This left Chu Feng shocked. If this was converted to the time of the other side, it would simply be terrifying. Chu Feng swallowed a mouthful of saliva. What kind of place was this so-called number 1 forbidden area in the foreign realm? It needed to be recorded using the Yang realm calendar, so why wasn't it synchronized with this world? Off to the side, the little vermilion bird's bright red eyes blinked. After hearing about the so-called number 1 forbidden area, it was clearly afraid, but it also listened attentively. "Do you think the number 1 forbidden area of this world is ordinary?" Any place that produced talisman paper, no matter which world it was in, was very heaven-defying, and even the great powers of the Yang realm were afraid of it. The lame fox's expression was serious. Its master previously wanted to secretly refine this world into a supreme treasure, turn it into a time weapon, but that first restricted region wasn't included. That place was too special, a place that transcended all control. In reality, any place that produced symbol paper was immeasurable. It could bury gods and devils of the heavens, make empyreans and others fall. After listening to him explain in detail, Chu Feng was moved. Now that he had a certain understanding of the so-called forbidden area, he increasingly felt that he shouldn't rashly barge in. That would be courting death. Strange. At the same time, he was suspicious that there was such a forbidden land in the Yang realm, and it wasn't just one of them. The little Taoist universe had it too, and this foreign realm also had it. Talisman papers appeared in all of them. What was the connection between these places? He shuddered at the thought of it. It was because space covered too much space, and the span of time was too great, reaching a horrifying level. It existed from the past to the present. The more one thought about it, the more horrified it became. "Go, take out 2 talisman papers," the lame stone fox said. Chu Feng looked at him from the corner of his eyes. Was he asking him to die? Or to die? Rather than that, he would rather take a trip to the reincarnation road and guard there for 100 years. Maybe he would be lucky enough to encounter a special period and catch all the talisman papers in one fell swoop. Don't even think about it. The Yang realm won't produce talisman papers in the short term. They usually appear during special periods and are concentrated. It's useless even if you wait for tens of thousands of years, the stone fox said. It told him that during normal times, The powerhouses of the Yang realm might fall when they barged into the forbidden area in search of talisman papers. Their blood would splatter on the mountains and rivers. But I can't go and throw my life away. Chu Feng cherished his life and didn't want to die in vain. In a universe where the little Taoist was, all the powerhouses of the world came together. All the great sects joined hands, and only then did they kill their way into the first forbidden area of their world with great difficulty. However, almost all the powerhouses were annihilated, and they only obtained a black talisman paper. Now, they wanted Chu Feng to enter the first forbidden area of this world alone. He hadn't lived enough yet. Moreover, a year ago, the little vermilion bird's mother was in existence at the peak of the god realm and was close to the divine king realm. She risked her life to enter the so-called first forbidden area to fight for a chance of a lifetime, but in the end, she also died there. The lame celestial venerable said, "How do you know it won't work if you don't try? In theory, you'll have a chance to enter once you reach the level of saint." In the history of the Yang realm, there were living beings of this level who obtained the talisman paper. I can't be compared to the son of a celestial venerable or the beloved daughter of a powerhouse. Chu Feng refused. Everything had been going wrong for him recently. The old fox gave him an animal skin map. It depicted the terrain of the first forbidden area and the area with the talisman paper. Relatively speaking, the talisman paper is in the periphery of the forbidden area and not the deepest part. If you only take one or two, you won't trigger anything. After all, there have been several of them stored for a long time. This kind of token is meant to be distributed. If no one takes it away, it won't be good for the forbidden area, the old fox informed him. Chu Feng became increasingly suspicious. What kind of place was this so-called forbidden area? He couldn't help but think too much. Before setting off, Chu Feng turned around and said seriously, "I just want to ask, do the mysterious lady of the desolate antiquity era, true fairies, and the young daughters of the celestial emperor really exist in this special terrain?" The little vermilion bird was immediately speechless. She rolled her eyes at him. The lame heavenly venerable fox immediately grinned and nodded. "Don't think too much. I'm a domain researcher. I'm very interested in those mountains and rivers in the world of the living." Chu Feng emphasized righteously. He thought of the terrain revealed when one side of the stone box shone. Could he find a reference in the world of the living? Did it exist in the world of the living? The little vermilion bird accompanied him and led the way for Chu Feng. The so-called number one forbidden area was under the 8 great abysses. The foreign realm was divided into 2 camps and divided into 2 regions. They were the Vicious Beast Plateau and the Abyss. However, the term abyss was very general because no one remembered exactly how many abyss had appeared in this area since ancient times. When a race arose, it would create an abyss. When a race perished, it would abandon an abyss. In reality, there are rumors that the gods on the Vicious Beast Plateau also lived near the abyss back then. They lived together around the number 1 forbidden area and only moved away later on. The little vermilion bird explained to Chu Feng along the way. Chu Feng trembled. The so-called number 1 forbidden area was under the various great abysses and in the boundlessly distant depths of the earth. This was somewhat terrifying. In the end, they didn't go down from the vermilion bird's abyss. Instead, they went underground from an abandoned ancient abyss. At first, Chu Feng thought it would be pitch black, but in the end, he was astonished when he really went several tens of thousands of kilometers deep underground. It was clearly a gentle land that was extremely bright. The depths of this underground were very auspicious. There were all kinds of ancient roads that were connected and extended all the way to the ultimate land. Finally, they arrived at their destination. The underground was spacious like an internal space that formed a world of its own. It didn't seem like the pitch-black underground ancient mine that they had imagined at all. So much so that the mountains and rivers ahead were magnificent. There were beautiful mountain peaks with golden waterfalls hanging from them, spiritual peaks with immortal mist rising in spirals, and small lakes that were tranquil and clear. Propitious chi pervaded the air, and auspicious light illuminated everything. Chu Feng suspected that this was the #1 forbidden area. It was simply a fairyland. The little vermilion bird was very nervous as she said, "This is the #1 forbidden area of our world. Since ancient times, it's unknown how many supreme experts have been buried here. It's called the burial ground of the gods. I've never heard of anyone being reborn and obtaining opportunities here." Amen. The burial ground of the gods? Chu Feng was astonished. Just from the name alone, it didn't seem like a good place and was full of omens. Yes, the little vermilion bird carried fear as she looked forward. She didn't explain to Chu Feng. In this world, almost all the deities had to face this strange matter in their later years. Their fates were miserable, and those like the old vermilion bird who persisted in not touching the special technique were few and far between. Even so, living in this world would more or less be contaminated by some gray mist. This was especially true for the deities in their later years. They couldn't escape to anywhere. However, there had always been a legend in this world that if one didn't die after entering the first forbidden area and came out alive, they would obtain a new life and solve the strange problem. As a result, over a relatively long period of time, who knows how many gods had come one after another. In fact, during the more glorious and prosperous times, quite a few god kings had rushed over. However, not a single living being had succeeded, and they all died horrible deaths in the end. In addition, evolvers who were on the verge of death in this area would face 10 times more powerful and cruel once they failed and couldn't leave. Their final fates were even more terrifying and miserable. In the end, this place became a forbidden land. It was because the deities that came all died, difficult to count. As a result, it became the burial ground of the gods. Even if one's body is entangled by the strange matter, if one has the opportunity, they can still obtain a new life here. Chu Feng was astonished and rather alarmed. Even though there are rumors, not a single person has succeeded. This is the accumulation of endless years, the lessons of countless blood. There isn't a single deity who doesn't wish to overturn this place. The little vermilion bird said with a sigh. The so-called deities also included the divine beasts of the abyss. It could be said that every inch of mountains and rivers here was blood, and they were all watered by divine blood. It looked peaceful like an immortal realm, but it was unknown just how many deities had fallen here. When Chu Feng faced this place, he felt restraining fear, but he also carried hope that he could be reborn here. Just what kind of ancient land was this exactly? What was inside? At the same time, he finally understood why the lame heavenly deity's master wanted to refine the foreign realm into a supreme treasure, a time weapon, but didn't dare include this place. It was a terrifying place after all. Suddenly, a streak of sword light flew over, stabbing towards the back of the little vermilion bird's head. The little vermilion bird quickly moved to the side, evading. At the same time, Chu Feng's reaction was even faster, decisively attacking murderously towards that person. At his sides, a pair of sword wings appeared. He directly used the little 6 streaks of time technique to kill the enemy. Whoa, it's a misunderstanding. I was wondering who it was. Turns out it was a junior sister from the vermilion bird race. That person explained. This was a male with a head of long golden hair, extremely brilliant. Chu Feng saw that he looked familiar, a bit similar to the past little martial god. He immediately realized that this was most likely someone from the martial god bloodline. Chong chong chong. The sword wings moved. Chu Feng swept past. That person was shocked, continuously evading, but many bloody wounds appeared on his body with pu sounds. What misunderstanding? You are the martial god's descendant. Weren't you all always investigating what happened to my mother? You actually found this place. No wonder you dare take action against me. The little vermilion bird said, hatefully, its large eyes completely red. It was because its mother died in the restricted land up ahead. Upon hearing this, Chu Feng decisively attacked. With a puff, A sword wing soared through the sky and killed this person. You have a death substitution talisman? Kill again. Chu Feng finished him off amidst the sounds of tearing. He had absorbed a large amount of divinity granules. As expected, the bloodline of a god was extraordinary. Yes, there are people coming from afar. Let's go. Let's enter the first restricted land. I don't believe in heresy. Maybe we can really seize all the fortunes this time, said Chu Feng. In the blink of an eye, they had entered a mountainous region and charged in. Before long, Chu Feng stopped in his tracks because his expression was incomparably grave after entering a certain distance. As expected, this place contained a terrifying terrain, and he couldn't wander around carelessly. Moreover, he saw the little vermilion bird crying with great sorrow. Before long, he found out why. There was a slope up ahead that was extremely sinister. Red mist diffused in the air, and there lay a thoroughly red old vermilion bird. Its feathers were sparse, and it was very withered. It had died there. Chu Feng's pupils contracted. What did he see? That was a dangerous land that was called the Fallen Phoenix Slope in the domain terrain. Even an immortal bird would die if it fell into such a dangerous land, naturally formed by the heaven and earth. The old vermilion bird had really violated a taboo by coming here. A divine bird had died in the Fallen Phoenix Slope. Don't cry. Everything will get better. You might even find your mother in reincarnation in the future, consoled Chu Feng. However, he knew that the chances weren't great. The creatures that died here were all very miserable. Ordinary soul lights couldn't even walk out and would completely disappear. Chu Feng wasn't certain that he could enter such a dangerous land now. So he took the little vermilion bird with him and circumvented it carefully and cautiously. Suddenly, an ear-piercing shriek rang out and made one's scalp go numb. A group of golden creatures flew out from a ravine and directly pounced towards the two. Chapter 959. A mass of golden creatures pressed down like a cloud, so oppressive that it made breathing difficult. These were densely packed insects, all less than 3 inches long. They had wings, and the sound of their wings was ear-piercing, like metal plates rubbing against each other, making one's teeth ache. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sword chi in Chu Feng's hand was like a rainbow. This was a divine weapon seized from the foreign land. Now it was surging with golden light, like raging flames burning. He was killing the strange insects. These insects were too densely packed, and more than 50% of them were at the golden arhut level. How could ordinary people block them when they swooped down like this? As the sword in Chu Feng's hand danced, countless insects shattered and fell. Even if they were all at the golden arhut level, they couldn't block the attacks of a saint. Not long after, the area was piled up with insect corpses. There were simply too many of them. He could kill many with a single sword strike, but he couldn't stop the swarm of insects. They rushed over from the canyon like golden clouds in an endless stream. They were like silkworms, but their entire bodies were golden, and they all had golden wings on their backs. The most terrifying thing was that when they opened their mouths, their teeth were sharp and gleaming with cold light. Near Chu Feng and the others, some insects swooped down and pierced through the sturdy rocks in the forbidden land, gnawing them into powder and riddling them with holes. This was horrifying. A single attack from these tiny insects made the mountains disappear and an abyss appear on the ground. Chu Feng sucked in a breath of cold air. The so-called Great Canyon insect nest was most likely gnawed out by these insects and wasn't a natural canyon. They dared to cause trouble in the forbidden land? Little vermilion bird, hurry up and eat the insects, Chu Feng shouted. The little vermilion bird, who was focused on fighting the golden flying insects in the sky, was furious when he heard this. He glared with his ruby-like eyes and wanted to turn around and peck him. After Chu Feng displayed his might, the sea of golden flying insects turned into ashes in the brilliant sword light. However, they were still so densely packed that even the sky was covered as they pounced over. Is there no end to these insects? Chu Feng frowned. The little vermilion bird said, These are mystic realm flying silkworms. They are relatively ordinary, but no one has barged in for tens of thousands of years. There's no consumption, so their numbers are definitely endless. The so-called mystic realm flying silkworm grew in the forbidden mystic realm. In this first forbidden area, a seemingly ordinary valley or a mountain could actually form a world of its own, and it was boundlessly vast and contained a world of its own. Normally, it was very dangerous. There were some unknown creatures living inside, but they did not show themselves. Only when someone intruded into the forbidden area would the secret realm open up, allowing them to go crazy with bloodthirst. This type of flying silkworm had appeared before in history. It would eat anything and everything from rocks to plants, and then to soil. It was incomparably savage, as if it wanted to devour the entire world. Clang! When Chu Feng waved his sword, golden specks of light flew over and collided with the sword, causing sparks to fly everywhere. Saint-tier insects had appeared, which was very bad. No wonder the stone fox said that once he reached the saint level, he would have the chance to enter the forbidden area. This was actually telling him that the weakest threat was also at the saint level. Come on my side, Chu Feng shouted at the little vermilion bird, fearing that something unexpected would happen to it. He didn't know how many divine insects there were, and if by any chance they covered the sky and covered the earth, not to mention the little vermilion bird being gnawed until not even its bones remained, even he wouldn't be able to escape. Clang, clang, clang. In a split second, Chu Feng suffered several dozen attacks. 8 divine insects appeared, and when they flapped their wings, the sound was extremely terrifying. It made one's soul ache as they emitted an indescribable shockwave energy. Chu Feng attacked furiously. He chopped a divine insect into 2 and pierced another one, nailing it onto the sword. Saint blood flowed. Buzz! At the same time, he shook the pair of sword wings that grew from his ribs and swept through the dangers in all directions. The sword light was like water, and with pu-pu sounds, apart from killing a sea of ordinary flying silkworms, he also used 3 other divine insects to kill them. Chu Feng was astonished. After seeing the saint-level insects, when he used the mutant technique, he discovered that the divinity granules he absorbed were much more concentrated than before, and there was also a bit more ancestral Taoist matter. This made him astonished, and then he attacked frantically, fighting fiercely here. Wong. Later on, there were more than 20 saint-level golden silkworms circling around him and fluttering about unceasingly. A moment of carelessness made Chu Feng have a bloody hole bitten out of his shoulder. His arm was almost pierced through, and he was almost in danger. How can there be so many? Chu Feng was fearful and scared because there was no end to these flying silkworms. They rushed out from the Great Canyon like a tide. Most of them were at the Golden Arhut realm, and this couldn't be considered an ordinary combat power. It didn't conform to the reality of a race's evolution at all. How many resources would they consume? They eat divine remains, or eat the soil mixed with divine remains to grow, the little vermilion bird informed him. Upon hearing this, Chu Feng's expression changed. He already understood that from ancient times until now, it was unknown how many gods had fallen here. There were countless of them, and they were all absorbed by the forbidden land. This kind of flying silkworm dared to eat divine remains. Were they not afraid of the strange matter's entanglement? He shivered inwardly. These flying silkworms were truly special. However, he felt relieved after he recalled that this was the first forbidden land. The living beings born here were certainly very special. Moreover, there was a rumor that whoever could walk out alive would be able to live a new life and remove the threat of the gray fog. It seemed that there was a solution in the first forbidden land. Suddenly, Chu Feng was terrified. He had absorbed a large amount of divinity granules, but he also felt uneasy. Apart from the divinity granules, there was also a wisp of gray fog entering his body. The living beings here contain a lot of divinity granules, but the strange substance inside their bodies is also denser. Chu Feng killed for 3 days and 3 nights. His whole body was covered in blood, and he wanted to vomit at the sight of the insects. He was on the verge of collapse and wanted to hide in the stone box several times, but he persevered. That was because, according to what the little vermilion bird said, if he couldn't even pass the first trial, then there was no need to charge into the forbidden land. He would die without a doubt. Until the fourth day, when his whole body was covered in wounds and there was a sea of insect corpses around him, the world finally became peaceful. There were no more insects flying out from the secret realm in the Great Canyon. He had killed dozens of saint-level insects. If this news were to reach the ears of ordinary people, they would certainly be dumbstruck. Dozens of saints had died. During this period of time, Chu Feng had tried to capture some insects and wanted to investigate their soul light. As a result, he discovered that their spiritual bodies were very special. They contained order runes and were filled with killing intent, but they didn't have their own consciousness. These are just biological tools. He felt a chill from head to toe. Rather than saying they were living beings, it would be better to say they were a sea of slaughter tools created by an indescribable and terrifying method. They were absolutely not normal living beings. The little vermilion bird looked at him worriedly. Her eyes were like crystals and carried uneasiness amidst their purity. She reminded Chu Feng in a low voice that cultivating the little 6 paths of time technique would bring about endless troubles. In fact, even if it was the legendary perfect 6 paths of time technique, in the eyes of the lame celestial venerable, it was still a different story as to whether cultivating it would bring about hidden dangers. There was currently no way to verify it. Let's go. Chu Feng didn't mind. Since he had already considered it and made a decision back then, there was nothing to regret or hesitate about. All of a sudden, he turned around and sensed some movement in the direction they came from. He rushed up a tall mountain with the little vermilion bird and opened his fiery eyes to look into the distance. There are people wandering around outside. They look like the descendants of those gods from Vicious Beast Plateau, said Chu Feng unhurriedly. He had dealt with these people before. He had killed some of them in the past 100 years. It seems like they already know that my mother has passed away since they found this place. The little vermilion bird was sad and very sad. Her mother had died and her siblings had already gone to the Yang realm. It was unknown whether they were alive or dead. Life still has to go on and the path still has to be walked. What's the point of thinking so much? Said Chu Feng. He deliberately played it down so that it could shake off that kind of emotion. They're coming to kill us, said the little vermilion bird. Outside the forbidden area, those people were observing the terrain and touching the bloodstains on the ground with their hands. Not long ago, Chu Feng had killed a descendant of a martial god and left behind traces. There's an illuminator. Chu Feng trembled with fear. He definitely couldn't go out now. He was stuck here and had no way out. He could only advance forward here and quickly become stronger, forcing him to rapidly evolve. Little Wu is dead. The little girl from the vermilion bird race found a helper, and it killed him himself. He's not simple. These people outside the forbidden area range from youths to middle-aged men. Every single one of them had an extraordinary bearing. They indeed came from Vicious Beast Plateau and belonged to the descendants of gods. These people had been in the vicinity of the abyss recently. They had clashed many times with their opponent from the divine beast camp, and they really wanted to slaughter the last descendant of the vermilion bird race. The old vermilion bird slaughtering a god was a great hatred for these people, and the impact was extremely terrible. If it doesn't come out, it will definitely die inside. However, if it gives up halfway and escapes, then leave it to me. I need a maid with divine blood. A blue-haired youngster said with a smile that seemed like the sun shining brilliantly. This time, you guys don't have to fight with me. I need a caged bird to respectfully offer it to the Lord God, said another white-haired youth. On the other hand, a middle-aged man didn't say anything. His head of golden hair emitted rays of light as he suddenly threw a short spear. With a boom, the void exploded and he threw it directly into the forbidden area. They didn't dare to enter deep into this ancient demonic land. The lessons taught by the blood of their predecessors made them tremble in fear. So many gods had died over the endless years, and now no one treated this place as a place of resurrection. No one could be reborn at all. This short spear was too terrifying. Rays of brilliance curled up all over the sky and penetrated everything. After the void exploded, energy surged and surged into the forbidden area. Let's go quickly. Chu Feng was terrified and his scalp went numb. The moment the other party raised his hand, he knew they were coming for them. He brought along the little vermilion bird and charged into the depths of the forbidden area, disappearing from the mountain peak. Boom! Only then did he take a step and leave. As the short spear flew down, a huge explosion occurred on that mountain. The mountaintop disappeared and energy wreaked havoc. With the methods of an evolver at the illuminator level, let alone a mountaintop, even a star would turn into fine powder if it was hit. It couldn't be stopped at all. However, the situation here was special. Only one mountaintop was shattered, and when the energy continued to spread, it was blocked by the rune light rising from the ground. As expected of the forbidden area, it was very difficult to destroy. Even an illuminator couldn't do it. After all, such mountaintops were densely packed and boundless. Although this was the underground world, there was no difference between this place and the surface. It was auspicious and radiant, and the mountains and rivers were magnificent. Puffed. Chu Feng spat out a mouthful of blood. Although he escaped in time with the little vermilion bird, he still suffered a slight impact. Illuminators were too terrifying and far surpassed saints. His face was slightly pale. With a crack, he reconnected his dislocated arm. There were many wounds on his back, and his shoulder had almost exploded. Are you all right? The little vermilion bird was very worried. I'm fine. This old fellow is really ruthless. He dared to attack the forbidden area. Isn't he afraid of suffering a calamity? Chu Feng gritted his teeth. When he became an illuminator and killed his way out, he would definitely skin them alive. So what if they were descendants of gods? The periphery of the forbidden area isn't an important area, so it's usually fine. If you dare to touch the depths of the forbidden area or the special terrain, it'll be a dead end. The little vermilion bird explained and told him to leave quickly. However, there was a special terrain blocking the way ahead. It would be troublesome to detour around it. Chu Feng flew at top speed, but he was still attacked. Another short spear flew over and pierced through the ground near him with a boom. The energy wreaked havoc and almost covered him underneath. Chu Feng flew out with bloody foam in his mouth. He turned back to look at those people and disappeared with the little vermilion bird. Chu Feng and the others were in big trouble. They were constantly attacked by the flying spears of the illuminators and had no choice but to escape quickly. In the end, they entered an unknown area. Large amounts of sword light rushed over. There were divine swords one after another, some damaged and broken, but there were also some that were still intact, their power boundless. Buzz! The void trembled. There were even large halberds uprooting from the ground and flying over. They suddenly blasted at Chu Feng and the little vermilion bird with divine might. The brilliance of this area was glaring and the atmosphere was stifling. Energy that surpassed the illuminator level filled the air. Even though they were far away, Chu Feng was already covered in wounds and bleeding. The little vermilion bird was also wailing and coughing up large mouthfuls of blood. The sky was filled with interweaving divine rainbows. This was the energy of the gods and their weapons. They weaved about and sealed off this mountainous region. The scene was too terrifying. Swoosh! Chu Feng had no choice but to open the space in the stone box. He rushed in with the little vermilion bird and quickly closed the lid. Even so, they were still suppressed by the wisps of divine might until their bodies cracked and were covered in blood. However, they managed to close the box at the critical moment and isolate their auras. Chu Feng frowned. This was indeed a dangerous area. They weren't even in the depths yet, but the outside was already like this. No wonder the old vermilion bird died at the fallen Phoenix Hill. These are the weapons left behind by the gods after they died. Now that they've been activated by the forbidden area, they're shooting out at full speed. They'll kill gods and Buddhas in their way. The little vermilion bird was very nervous. Clang, clang, clang. The stone box was attacked. The divine swords, great halberds, and spears all fell down. They either hacked or stabbed into the stone box, sending it flying. Chu Feng and the little vermilion bird tumbled back and forth because the stone box was being attacked. It tumbled about and was even sent flying through the air. Chu Feng's mind was heavy. This forbidden area was terrifying after all. If he didn't have the stone box, he would have died by the weapons of the gods. He sighed inwardly. The lame fox was too much of a scam. This was simply sending him to his death. After an unknown amount of time had passed, everything finally quieted down. Chu Feng had the little vermilion bird hide in the stone box. He carefully went out to probe around, but he didn't feel any danger. This was a grassland that stretched as far as the eye could see. He didn't know what kind of region the divine swords, great halberds, and the others had hacked the stone box into. There was actually such a vast grassland within the mountains and rivers of this forbidden area. It was just too large. This was definitely not the outermost region. The surroundings were very quiet. The lush green meadow grew to half a person's height, the fresh air and the gentle light. Everything was so beautiful. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew over. All the wormwood rose and fell violently, following which they parted as if forming a path. Then, a layer of goosebumps appeared all over Chu Feng's body. He saw a large green snake with a diameter of 5 or 6 meters. It was even faster than lightning and rushed out from the depths of the grassland. It opened its bloody mouth and pounced towards him. A saint-level snake. Puffed. Chu Feng brandished his sword and fought with all his might. He beheaded the snake and chopped off its head, causing blood to gush out. Suddenly, he felt an evil wind blowing against his face. He abruptly moved several kilometers away and looked up. A silver-winged dragon swooped down and tore the earth apart. This was a peak saint-level existence. Roar! At the end of the horizon, a golden tyrannosaurus leaped up from a forest. It traversed the vast sky and directly pounced towards Chu Feng. What the hell is this place? Chu Feng trembled. These ferocious beasts were all late-stage, saint-level experts, and all of them were very powerful. After that, he launched an intense battle. This battle lasted for 10 years. That was because he had no way to leave this vast land where the grassland and forest were. There were ferocious beasts everywhere, and if he killed one, another would appear. The ferocious beasts would join forces to hunt him down. During the hurried years, Chu Feng brought along the little vermilion bird to cultivate and kill enemies at the same time. He was improving constantly and evolving at a rapid pace. When the 10th year was over, Chu Feng beheaded a golden monster that was 30 kilometers tall. Its blood flowed like a river and dyed the grassland red. He had already become an existence at the peak of the saint level. He had accumulated enough divinity granules a long time ago, and his corporeal body wasn't weaker than an illuminator's. What he lacked was the final step of comprehension towards the order of the world. He was so close to becoming an expert at the illuminator level. Even Chu Feng himself was astonished and a little afraid. Cultivating the little 6 rays of time technique was too heaven-defying and made him feel extremely uneasy. Every time he beheaded an enemy, he would absorb not only divinity granules and ancestral Taoist matter, but also a portion of order fragments. If not, how is it possible to touch the threshold of the illuminator level? No one could improve so much in 10 years. It could only be said that the little 6 rays of time technique was a shortcut and could be said to be incomparably heaven-defying. Everything has a price. My cultivation is so fast. I don't know how much strange matter I've absorbed. Chu Feng felt a chill in his heart. However, there was no way out now. During this period of time, the little vermilion bird was also evolving and its cultivation was growing steadily. It didn't cultivate the mutant technique. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.